Cool. Awesome, man. Thank you very much for coming in. Dave Marsh, how are you, mate?
I'm good, buddy. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
This conversation.
I know it's been a while since we've done a podcast together.
Yeah. That podcast I started in COVID that didn't end up being anything.
You're back on one. This is one of the biggest ones that you'll ever be on. You would have been on a few podcasts before, yeah?
Been on a couple.
Yeah. Which ones have you been on?
So I did one in the UK with Lift the Bar.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one I went on, it was a podcast called, it was like an entrepreneurial podcast I did like before I went to the UK.
Right.
Which was, I think it was like a property developer. And it was basically one of my online clients. They invited me on to talk about kind of like health, fitness, and all things.
Cool.
Which was cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, a couple. Not many.
Not many. Well, mate, this is probably going to be the biggest one, so I have to apologise in advance for all the fan mail that you're going to get, although you'd be used to that anyway.
my days of men's physique are long behind me.
Please, mate, please. Are you going to compete again, or no? That's it. Fair.
Yeah, it doesn't really align with me anymore.
Yeah.
And I think even being around that again last year, where I had Alexandra competing, I was just like, I really just don't like being around these people.
It's not the most healthy.
No, you just see some weird shit at competitions, and you see the guys backstage, and it's just like, nah, this is a very interesting place to be.
Yeah,
and I think again, yes, they are incredible athletes, don't get me wrong, and I think, it takes a hell of a lot of dedication. It just value-wise doesn't align with me from a health standpoint anymore. And I say anymore, I mean, it did and it didn't back in the day for different reasons. But I think as you grow as a coach, you care less potentially about that side of things. Certainly for me anyway, just in my experience. And it's more about kind of I guess health, performance, and that side of it, rather than focusing too much on body composition. But don't get me wrong, I still enjoy taking people through the process from a coaching standpoint. Yeah. It's just not necessarily something I would do personally again.
No.
Right.
I guess it's probably changed a little bit now, but people realize that that's not for health. It can't. It's getting that.
No, it can. It's not healthy. Getting that lean is not healthy. We know that, and unfortunately, that side of the industry, we know comes with a lot of ped use and anabolic steroids and all that side of it, right? And if you want to compete at a high level, which if you are an ambitious human, and most people in our industry, I think, relatively are. Yeah. I think it comes with that you've got to accept that that's part of the sport you're doing. Yeah. Not saying that probably any fitness sport comes with that or doesn't come with that, but it probably does to an extent, right?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, mate. Well, I guess like I spoke off air, the goal is to ideally create some cool content, get a little bit of backstory about you, which I know a little bit, but hopefully, I can learn a little bit more. And then we can bounce ideas off each other, talk about whatever, and go from there. So I guess tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Cool. I'm Coach Dave Marsh, I guess, from a coaching standpoint. Yeah. I've been a coach now, a PT coach for 14 years, which is kind of wild to say out loud that I've been in this game that long. Born in the southwest of England, a place called Stroud, which is a small town in the Cotswolds, in the middle of the Five Valleys. Believe it or not, I didn't grow up inherently sporty until I went to secondary school. Actually, was relatively overweight. Yeah. Grew up in kind of a small cottage, didn't really play any sport until I reached secondary school. And then got to secondary school and found rugby. And rugby was where I kind of ignited a bit of passion for something that I was, one, good at, but also just really enjoyed. Yeah. And it was a sport that I just found my passion for fitness. Mm-hmm. And that drove me to focus on performance and want to get better at the sport, be stronger, fitter, so I can move around the pitch better, get stronger so I can perform better. And that's when I guess first got into training. Mm-hmm. And my first training partner was Josh Bridgman, who now runs 1MR. He's IFBB pro bodybuilder. Yeah.
Big boy.
Yeah, he's a big boy. Something like 120 kilos now, and very much went down that route. But yeah, Josh was my first training partner that we first trained with at the gym, a place called Fifth Dimension Health Club. And that's where I guess I got really interested in health, fitness, performance, nutrition. Was reading a lot of mental health, a lot of strength and conditioning stuff as well, and introduced to obviously Charles Poliquin, Paul Chek, Kelly Starlett, which were I guess the big OGs of that era.
I've had conversations about those three within the last 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, I think they're almost a little bit forgotten to an extent, and it blows my mind because I went back through some of the Kelly Starlet stuff not so long ago, and I was like, this stuff bangs,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, it was so far ahead of its time that I feel like it's got lost a little bit in this fitness industry
I think
in
with
today's world.
Yeah, I think with that stuff is when they're off a little bit. With as we learn, we get better, and we're always all going to be wrong about something a few years back.
Yeah.
And so I think people hold on to that. Oh, they said that was stupid, so the rest of their methodology is shit. But most people don't know that a lot of what they do in strength and conditioning probably started with what Charles would say.
100%. I mean, yeah, Charles was kind of like the OG of it, right?
Yeah,
and it was
yeah.
just like a lot of his stuff, even though things went a bit wacky with like, 8-9 grams of fish oil and things like that. But then if you look at the things today where people are trialing these high doses of fish oil and seeing the benefits, you can understand where it came from.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's going to be two edges to that. And like even Port Jack, like he went very much down the hippy dippy spiritual kind of like flap your wings and run down like the things. Like his book, I think it was like How to Eat, Move and Be Healthy or something like that.
Yeah, I've read that one.
Yeah. And it's just like some of the check presses and things like that, like going through rotation through your shoulders. It's just like, again, people don't do it anymore. And you don't see people experimenting with the level of experimentation that those guys kind of went through with their training and their application. Yeah. And that's where I guess I found my love for the industry.
Yeah.
It was like, when I was PTing, and I got into PT at kind of like 18, 19, I didn't go to uni, didn't do strength and conditioning rehabilitation MASHA, which is what I looked at doing. I got advised to kind of like do my PT course and then go into personal training, and a lot of stuff you'll learn kind of hands-on if you read and get experience. And I had a good kind of, I guess, mentor at the time, which it was Strat Sports Clinic, which was a clinic. Mm-hmm. So I worked closely with a physio there, which kind of introduced me to a lot of practices with like Thomas test and things like that to understand assessments. And it was that learning process of like reading these books and just having the time to play around with it. And I think when you're a first, like initial PT or where I was back in the day, I was living at home with my dad. I had the time, like we're talking 3 hours a day, to just fuck around, try out different training methods and put myself through it.
Yeah.
And it was fun.
Yeah.
Right. And it was just like, I went through probably 4 or 5 years of just using methods from Poliquin and things like that. And like Brad Schoenfeld, like, the old school kind of max muscle building hypertrophy stuff.
You would have been a T Nation fan, surely?
Do you know what? I didn't read too much T Nation.
Really?
A little bit.
Yeah.
More bodybuilding.com, a lot of mental health.
There's some good stuff on there.
Yeah. Like back in the day. And like, it was like, I guess.
I think it's
like,
cool to rag on that stuff now, but that's where a lot of people got their information.
A lot. Yeah.
A lot of the big dogs in the industry. Yes, some of it was wrong, but it's the
100%
pursuit and the enjoyment of the process which made the whole thing, it was all fun. Now it's cool to rag on everything almost.
Yeah, it's been a big change, man. I mean, like, obviously social media's changed things a lot. Like back in the day, I just trained to enjoy training, feel strong, get strong, and it was like my main goals in my early years was just like obviously get big and powerful for rugby.
Yeah.
Right. So I think I was, I don't know, like 80 kilos roughly, maybe 75, 80 kilos. And I got myself up to like, I think it was like 95. Yeah. Right. Like packed on 20 kilos over the space of 5 years of just like doing the stuff where I'd spend probably 6 months building, like a few months maintaining, and then somewhere I would do a few months of cutting. Yeah. Right. And I just repeated that cycle for 5 years. And obviously now the sports science and I guess the biomechanics, we've got a little N1 stuff coming in from Coach Cassim, which is fantastic. I just did the same movements repeatedly over for 5 years and got stronger. Yeah. Right. It was just like, cool, we squat, we deadlift, we front squat, we lunge, we do your clean and jerks for your power side of things, and just cycle through the same exercises. Now to a point where I think we're in this world where there's so much choice and option that people just chop and change things and just don't get good at the basic exercises. Yeah. And I think there are limitations with training when it comes to that, because people aren't spending the time to build the skill, like acquisition of that lift and get good at it. Right. Yeah. And I just didn't think anything more of it, and it was just like the boring same movements repeated over time, and I got excited by it. Right. Whereas now it's just like I just don't get that feeling anymore. It's weird. Yeah. And I'm like, is it because back then, one, it was new, but also you were seeing that progression, like, obviously when you're a young athlete, that's when you're going to grow the most, you're going to get stronger the most. And like now I'm in my 30s, it's one of those things where it's just like, okay, cool, I know I'm going to atrophy, I'm probably not going to be as strong, and that's okay, I just have to deal with that. Yeah. And I'm not going to go down the route of taking all the things to make myself stronger.
Yeah. But it's good to get stuck into, and I revisit every now and then. I'll pick up one of Charles's books and read it, and it just like, or anything like that, and it gets you just excited about. And at the end of the day, it is all the rabbit holes are really cool as well too, because they do add, where things like what Kasim does, it adds another element to it, but it's just not the only. If you just sow down the rabbit hole, then it doesn't become fun as well too, and it's just going.
Well,
Yeah,
that's kind of the problem I find now with social media.
yeah,
Right? It's like you got research articles popping up every day, right? And it's like they're just contradicting one each other, but the research really hasn't changed that much in the last 200 years.
no,
Right? It's now small, minor research groups with small kind of participants. And it's just like, if you look at kind of like, I guess, the meta analysis of things where it's like the big kind of research papers, it all points at the same thing.
yeah,
But because of these small snippets of bit of information or research that's being posted each day, people are taking this as almost gospel.
yeah,
Right? And it's just like, you see it every day on social media. It's like this exercise is bad, or this exercise is good, or this is the most optimal exercise, or bent over rows are bad for hypertrophy. It's just like, fuck, like we're kind of missing the point here.
that one's come full circle, and it's like in the last little bit, I've seen people now.
Yeah, I still see it, dude. And it's just like, dude, like I look back at photos from myself when I literally just did the main movements, right? And was really strong at them. And I'm just like, my muscle development and hypertrophy that I had back in the day was so much more than I have now. And I've not seen, like, I guess, natural bodybuilders. And like, if you look at like Bridgman when he was natural, I've not seen natural bodybuilders come through with that same kind of development in recent years. And I see younger coaches coming through and I'm just like, they just don't touch it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you're doing all this random kind of like pulley, low iliac pull stuff, reach around, whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you're still not as big.
Yeah. Yeah.
So from evidence previously that we've seen from past anecdotal evidence, and don't get me wrong, there are some incredibly gifted natural bodybuilders you see in today's world, but you look at the general person, right, that has gone through all these different new training protocols from a natural standpoint. It's like, I still think the old stuff played better.
Yeah.
And probably from an athletic development standpoint, if we think about it from like a muscular co-contraction standpoint, like bent over rows, all those big movements that involve a lot of muscular contractions with different muscles from stabilizers and everything else, like you're going to get more overall strength through those movements than you are kind of the random reach around.
Yeah.
Right?
Which the all that stuff has, I think both has its place. It's just that it's probably, you should have, maybe 10% of the technical stuff, and then most of the, because I think the overarching thing that gets people results is probably the hard work, not the technicalities. The technicalities is awesome. I love that shit as well too, and if I can make something better, why not?
Yes.
But then is it actually better, or is it just overcomplicated as well too? Yeah. And it's really the cool thing about doing the really overcomplicated stuff, or not really overcomplicated, but the more overcomplicated stuff, is you learn in that process as well, and that in itself is part of the fun as well. Like,
oh, absolutely.
Never felt that part of my lap before, but then how can I do something like that and then also get that on that row as well, where I can really shift some weight and also just save some time as well?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the playfulness of the new research methods and things like that coming out and understanding biomechanics of what we do now has been great.
Yeah.
Because it's allowed us to play around with positions and think about where we are loading things, and more so how to target certain areas a bit more, right? Which has been great. But it's almost got to the point where it's like we've gone too much one way, and we need to come back to the kind of like, we need to lift heavy and hard and train hard. Yeah. Right. Where I feel it's kind of lapsed a little bit on that side of it. Because let's be honest, barbells, you can load it to fuck, right? And you can't argue with that. Yeah. It's like, it's the most loadable form of exercise you can do, right? So if we look at it from a kind of like total volume standpoint of load lifted, then barbells are probably going to be the best thing for you, regardless, right? And yes, there is a technical element of it, but like, most people are going to be training for the rest of their life. Yeah. So using a technical or lack of technical ability to train well with a barbell is not really an excuse. It's just you're being lazy because you haven't put the time in to actually learn the skill. Yeah. Right. And if you do the thing for fucking 5 years on the trot multiple times a week, guess what? You're going to get pretty fucking good at it. Yeah. Right.
Well, I always say, I say that barbells and dumbbells have probably been responsible for building more muscle mass across the world than any cable machine or, lat pull, crazy biomechanical exercise can actually build. Because, you know, what did Arnold do? What did Franco Colombo do? What did...
I mean, a lot of D-ball.
Yeah, a lot of that. So, but you know, all that they did all the basics as well too. And you see the old school strongman, you see that a little bit more on social media now as well too, of, you know, these, you know, people like Eugene Sandow and stuff like that. They were jacked back in the day, just lifting not much, you know, not much technical stuff.
No.
Just pick shit up. And
yeah, I mean, you even look at kind of like the technique as well, and I even look back to my old technique on things. I'm just like, it was not perfect.
Yeah.
Right? I just trained fucking hard.
Yeah.
Right? I trained consistently well. I trained fucking hard.
Yeah.
And like, yes, technique wasn't necessarily the best, but guess what? It worked.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just like, yes, okay, if we're looking from like optimal joint mechanics. And again, I think technique is so important, but I also think it can be a limiting factor where we're almost looking for perfect technique on every rep, which can be a limiting factor if we're looking at kind of like muscle growth and stimulus to an extent.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, if you're pushing that hard, there probably is going to be some technical breakdown, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? As long as it's not dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that, finding where that middle ground is and making sure that you aren't pushing it past that point.
Yeah.
But also, our bodies are resilient as fuck. If you train them to be resilient, they'll be resilient. If you train them to be, you know, break in fucking half with like a plank of wood, then they're probably going to break in half.
Plus, you play rugby.
Well, yeah, I used to run at things and hit my head really hard and concuss myself quite a few times. And I kept playing.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like we can deal with a lot of shit. I think there's place for all of it, and the big thing is, I guess probably whatever you enjoy the most and wherever you can train the hardest, probably going to be bestest. Where you can train the hardest will be the best for you, and it's like stick. You know, I always come back to just doing the basic stuff, like, because I just find it better. I enjoy it more. It's cool to get on a machine and feel something, and then I'm like, cool, how can I get like a similar contraction on a dumbbell? Because I know that machine's always going to be taken. Like, I've been doing, as I was saying, I've trained at Onyx recently, and they've got some like cool converging presses, which is excellent. Yeah. Really, really good, but they get used quite a lot. And I'm like, okay, well, there's 5 benches that I could just jump on those. Yeah. So I'll use that when I need it to get a better contraction, and then I jump on a normal dumbbell press and bang. Yeah. You know, it might be just that little bit more. It's just, it's time and place, but I think the basics come back to, they always come full circle. It just can't go much further.
No, it can't. And it's, I think, like, even playing around with, like, obviously the prime strength equipment, right? Yeah. It's like we can change the resistance profile and things, which has been fun to really play around with and target certain things. And like, even like I've done my hamstring playing some touch rugby and on the beach, which was, I haven't beach run in ages. Of course it was going to go. It was like, I knew it would. And then I did it and I was like, fuck yeah, idiot.
What did you, was it about just a tweak or?
Yeah, kind of right. Like, I guess proximal hamstring, right, where the ischial tuberosity kind of like attaches, like right up the top. Just put my foot down in the sand and just like, as I went to catch the ball, just straight out. I was like, fuck, yeah.
Have you tore your hamstring before?
A couple of times, yeah. Actually in rugby. Yeah, like, it's always been in rugby. Yeah. Right? And it's just like, I pulled it, I've torn it a few times, but not like horrifically. Didn't you tore?
I tore mine.
Yeah, real bad, where it all went. Yeah.
Black.
It went completely black. Yeah, I haven't done it that bad.
That's like quad dominance, mate. It's just too much on the anterior, not up on the.
I know. I've been working on the posterior. We're getting there. I need to build it back up and get hip thrusting again.
Yeah, for sure. I did it for a little bit. I'm not sold on it yet. I didn't persist with it for very long, honestly.
What, the hip thrust?
Hip thrust.
Dude, it's one of those things. I think there's, I mean, Brett Contreras, what he recently came out with, we don't need to talk about, but with the weird pegging machine. Yeah, fuck. Like, is this really what we're coming to now? Like, peg machines in the gym to sell products? Like, fuck, it's abysmal. But unfortunately...
And then he said about, old school powerlifting.
I know. And did you see the guy, like, he quoted as well and go on his page, and he's like, he's doing air pegging? I'm like, is this a real thing? Like, a powerlifter's actually using this to lock out.
I reckon they're probably doing more deadlifts to fix their lockout.
I mean, just go home to your missus and practice. Like, fuck, you don't need to be doing that in the gym.
No,
it's just bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, the hip thrust, again, that's probably one thing I have changed my mind on.
Okay.
All right, so we're getting onto the topic of kind of changing mind on things like hip thrust. I do think it is a bit of an overrated exercise.
Yeah, okay.
I think it has its place. If we think about it, like, I guess from a biomechanical standpoint, right, we are shortening the glutes, okay? So spending more time in the top position is going to where you're going to have most tension, okay? Doing that under high load, where if we think about the effects of gravity, is going to be jamming you into like an anterior pelvic tilt. Is it the best way of doing it? Probably not.
Yeah.
And this is where I guess I've changed my mind, because now I look at things from a bit more of a biomechanical lens. I'm like, just do a 45-degree back extension.
Yeah.
You don't have to waste your time setting it up, and it's going to be less load, like spinal loading, jamming you into anterior pelvic tilt. And it's just like, you're going to do high volume anyway.
Yeah.
So do that instead of loading a bar to FAC and just like pumping it at the top. And most people don't even lock out. So you're not getting short and glute.
Yeah.
Right. So if you think about the intent of the exercise, it's like, all right, well, just do a 45-degree back extension.
Yeah.
Good.
Or do it with 50% load that you are doing it with as well.
Correct. Yeah. Or do a lighter load with higher reps and then actually focus on the lockout at the top rather than just like stroking your glute ego.
Yeah. No, I think exactly the same, mate. I joke and say that it's a bad exercise, but it's just that. And I just put it into that context as well too. You know, I think it's kind of like it's the girls' version of a bench press. Almost like that's kind of what we're seeing, of like the high schooler going in and just got to bench press the most amount of weight with whatever form, you know. And you kind of see that a little bit with how, and it's fine, you know, training your ego is important, I think, as well too, you know.
Agreed. Yeah. Sometimes you have to.
Yeah, there's a reason why I try and squat as much as I can, because it's good for my ego. But I think as well too is where people where it misses the mark a little bit is because it is. Yeah, we get a lot of tension or leverage in that top part, but also when it's fully shortened, you're probably not going to be building as much muscle mass as you were, as if you were loading it in a bit more of a stretch position. Correct. And then moving into that, and you know, all those sorts of things. And you see the load, and then people just dump into a heap of lumbar extension. And I would say that from the girls that I've worked with, female trainers, I would say it's one of the things that contributes more to their discomfort of hips, knees, and back than most other exercises.
I completely agree.
Yeah, because and I think it can be done really well, and I think I don't have any issue with hip extension. Everybody loves it. It's great. It's good. But I think it's just that those things, when you take it into account, that, you know, people just try to load it too heavy. And I think,
yeah, I mean, again, like, go back to Brett Contreras, right? He came up with it, right? And he invented it. And back when I was exposing myself to a lot of like Brett Contreras, Alan Aragon, like Brad Schofield, all those guys, right? And the research, they were the big guys, right? When it came to research, like, that's probably when I got to being my strongest, was when I was hip thrusting 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And I was understanding kind of the SRA curve, like strength, stimulus, recovery, adaptation, and understanding that because it's a short and position exercise, I could do this more often than I would a squat and RDL, right? So then it was kind of filling in the gaps with my training with that exercise to continue that SRA curve for me to get stronger and get results and build muscle, right? So from that standpoint, yes, it worked incredibly well, and it did put a lot of strength on my squat and deadlift.
Yeah.
Right, because you're training in a different position than you normally would, and kind of working through that. So I think, yes, that's good. But again, squat and deadlifts, right? It goes back to that. Yeah. Like, those should be your kind of meat and potatoes. The hip thrust is like the kind of like the vegetables on the side that is going to kind of fill in the gaps a little bit, right? Yeah. And it's, if you get good at squatting and deadlifting, you're probably going to have a great set of glutes. Yeah. And the hip thrust is just going to be the icing on the cake, just to kind of pump them up a little bit, right? Yeah. And it's like,
I think it's excellent if it was a machine, there was more machine-based available. I think the barbell because I'm all about efficiency and sort of being resourceful, and I can see doing it with a barbell in a box, it's very resourceful. If you had a machine, because that's a big barrier to entry for me, it's just that setup, and I'm like, I would do it all the time if I had a machine, or then the back extension. But that's
spending 20 minutes to set it up, and it's just like you see females that aren't quite as high between the boxes, so they start getting plates and putting it under and like loading it to different angles. You're just like, oh my god, I can't be fucked. Yeah. And then they're taking like 20 minutes set up, 20 minutes put away. I'm just like, just back extension, save the time of the gym.
Yeah, yeah. And particularly, we know like the shortened position stuff is probably going to be more suited towards your higher rep sets.
Well, exactly, right. It's like, what are we trying to do? Like, build lactates and metabolic stress, right? So short position, that's where we're going to utilize higher rep stuff anyway.
Yeah.
So it makes more sense from a programming standpoint to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, again, I don't know why people do it, but they do it. Right. I still do it in my programming where I will take people through, probably less so now.
Yeah.
I don't go heavy on the hip thrust. I'm just like, all right, it's just a gateway to be able to do RDLs or back squats or whatever it might be. And now I do more high volume stuff in my training because, again, like I found with clients and evidence that, yes, back, hips, everything from a loading standpoint, we keep it high volume, less weight.
Yeah.
Backs better, hips are better. Great, cool,
Yeah.
fantastic. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you can train more on everything else and that,
Exactly.
that sort of stuff. I also do really like it because it is a shortened position, you can get a better sensation from it. So I definitely do use it. If I was to use a hip thrust, particularly with the people that I've used it with in the past, they might have already they really, really like the hip thrust, but they've had a hip or knee injury or back injury before, and they kind of want to get back in. And I'm like, that's completely fine. We'll put it back in, but we'll be intelligent in the way that we do it. I'll do a shortened variation of it, then a shortened position being the hip thrust, and then into a lengthened position doing like a goblet squat or something like that. They'll get a better sensation through their glutes, through that big range of motion, which I think now we're seeing more of the research coming out that says the stretch position is going to be really, really good for more hypertrophy. And I think from a mobility standpoint, if we can take a muscle through a large range of motion, we can feel it through that range of motion and, get a stretch there, and we're going to have better mobility and all those sorts of things, and then a better contraction as well too.
Absolutely.
I think doing a 1RM hip thrust, no one cares. No one cares. And the range that you're doing it through, it's so insignificant.
Well, yeah, I mean, even all the research on the stretch kind of mediated hypertrophy and everything else, like the bros were onto something, right?
Yeah.
Everyone shits on the bodybuilders and the bros. It's just like they've been doing this for a long time, right? And even though the research wasn't really pointing in the direction of what they were doing, it fucking worked, right? They're doing their pulse half reps at the kind of bottom portion of the motion, like the movement, right? Back
Just
in
to
the day,
get a bit extra
just
out,
to get a bit of extra out of it, and guess what? It works.
It worked,
And now there's research coming out like supporting that, and everyone was shitting on bodybuilders for a long time. It's just like, you guys were smart before your time. Like, you didn't know why it worked, but it worked, right? Yeah. And that's kind of where the evidence will come in a little bit with it.
Yeah, it's a big one, but I think the caveat with the lengthened stuff is if you can't feel a muscle in a lengthened range, it's unlikely that you are probably going to build it as much as the research might say.
Yes.
So I've had before. I use that with the example with the hip thrust and the squat. If you can't feel your glutes through a big range of a squat, let's just get them more sensitive, and then we'll get you on the squat, and then all of a sudden, bang, then you can use your glutes for a big range.
Yes.
I've had some guys with biceps, they can't feel their bicep in a lengthened position, so I'll get them to do a spider curl or something, get that sensation, then we'll take them into a lengthened position, and then it's just got a better connection, because typically when in the lengthened position, you're going to be able to handle a heavier load, recruit higher threshold motor units, it's easier to work harder on.
Yes.
And then all that fun stuff. But I think if you can't actually contract the muscle, then
what's the point?
Yeah, you're gonna probably get some muscle, but you're gonna get it from some other muscle as well too.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing, but we kind of got on to a little bit of a tangent there.
Always.
But so you started doing. We'll get back to you. So you started PT when you were 18.
18, 19.
Yeah, right. So straight out of school?
Straight out of school, yeah. So I was working at kind of like a bar at the time, just helping out. And then I did my personal training diploma, which was with Premier International.
Yeah.
It was like a 12-week, I think, in-person thing.
That's who I think Mark Roper was saying he did his through as well.
Yeah, Premier were good back in the day.
Yeah.
Right? It was actually one of the more like thorough ones, and it was the most expensive one at the time.
Yeah.
That I could find. I was like, I want to do it properly. And then you realize that like everything you learn is basic as fuck.
Yeah.
And then you kind of step on the gym floor and you're like, okay, I train people now. What the fuck do I do?
Yeah. But also, like, in hindsight, that's a good thing, because you are super resourceful with your education. You continue to do it because...
And this is the thing, man. It's like, I was, I guess, lucky, but also time going into the industry at that time, it was just like, the personal training wasn't really looked at as a real thing.
Yeah.
Right? And it was like, even my dad was just like, you sure you want to do this? Right? You're going to just lift weights at the gym and earn some money? I'm just like... Yeah.
Get a real job that pays you, actually.
Yeah. You're not going to go to uni? What the fuck? And I was just like, no, I'm going to do this. So I was like, And I remember I would be that guy that would be, and I think it was someone at maybe the Premier International course that said it. It was just like, be the person that is literally there when the gym opens, the smiley face on the front door, and just fucking talk to every single person walking through that door. And I did that.
Yeah.
I was literally on that front help desk. As soon as people walked in, I would say hello to every single person. I made a point of introducing myself to every person that walked through that gym door.
Yeah.
And I became then probably one of the most popular PTs in that gym within the space of a year.
Yeah.
Right? Because I was there consistently every day when it opened at like 6 a.m. Spoke to everyone, got myself known. I would just go up to talk to people, man. Just have conversations, right, about how their training's going. And back then, the gym was mainly just cardio machines, right? And it had this tiny little weights area that no one knew how to really use. And it was just like, my passion was strength training, right? All I was reading at the time, because I was like kind of like, I guess, kid that wanted to build strength and get jacked, like most guys with a lot of testosterone, right?
Noble goal.
Absolutely, right? It's just like most people want to look good at that age, and especially coming from my background, I think of being like slightly overweight, not understanding nutrition or that stuff. It made me more passionate about trying to get in shape and like, I guess, look good was an extent of like the aesthetic goal, which, you know, I think it's one of those things where like it's kind of frowned upon a little bit in the industry, but at the end of the day, like, it is a goal to have, and for a lot of people, like, it's going to make them feel more confident, it's going to give them more self-worth, and like, you know, affect a lot of areas of their life, especially from the clients we work with, not just a performance standpoint, right? And it was just like the impact that had on my life and how I felt was great. And then got into personal training and did what did I do? I did like sports therapy, did like, I think it was like lower back pain, a GP referral lower back pain course, which again, I look at that course now and I'm just like, Jesus Christ, like this was what the information was. Wild. And then sport therapy, so like hands-on, like massage skills and all that kind of stuff to understand like the therapeutic side of things. And then got into more, I guess, specific courses. So Lift the Bar came around, which were kind of like a company to raise the education of personal trainers, which was great because they brought over kind of like Brad Schoenfield and like Alan Aragon and the big names, Brett Contreras. Like we did a PTC conference with them, and they kind of like widened the audience. So there was people like Martin McDonald, who runs like Martin University now, or Mac Nutrition, I think it is now. So he did like a nutrition course for them. Suk Sidhu runs like online fitness business. There was like Luke Johnson, who did like strength, like Shredded by Science. A lot of people came out of this little group, right? And it was like we had access to that, which was amazing from an education standpoint, because there was a lot that kind of went into that. Lift the Bar and kind of what they had access to. James Krieger, who was like the leading researcher on kind of like NEAT and all those things, like he was part of it as well. So they got them to run like mini courses for Lift the Bar, and did like an education platform, so you had access to that, which was great. So that really accelerated, I guess, my scientific understanding of personal training and kind of like looking at all the different areas, not just building muscle, but NEAT, like nutrition, all the things that are going to impact your clients, right? And that was fantastic. And at that point, I think I've been a PT maybe 4 or 5 years. And this was the point where I guess my personal training business had got to a point where I was flat out, like seeing like 40, 50 sessions a week. I would always do an hour sessions. And it was just like, my week was just like wild, right? And I was like, all right, I need to do something with this, right? Because I can't keep doing this. So this when Sukes did more a course on business. So I went into this like online fitness business course to like help me understand business a little bit more and understand copywriting, marketing. A guy called Mike Samuels, who's a big copywriter in the UK for fitness. He kind of did a course with him as well. So I got introduced to that side of writing. And understanding business, which led me to take on a personal trainer at the time, like subcontracting him under me.
Yeah, right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so did that. My brand was like just DM Fitness, like Dave Marsh Fitness, whatever it was. So ended up taking on a guy called Mark, who was actually a client who'd been with a client of mine for a couple of years, and he was like, I think he worked in a fishing shop at the time.
Right.
And he just wanted a career change, right? And he was really passionate about fitness, enjoyed it, so ended up coming on board with me. I was just like, dude, I will help you, right? Kind of like mentor you and kind of give you the support you need to kind of go there. So he came on board, and then another client of mine, Emerald, who again, she like kind of got married and again had like a freak out and was just like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? And then she came on because she loved being a PT as well and just loved fitness. So she ended up coming and working under the brand of DM Fitness as well. So we had like 2 PT subcontractors.
That's cool.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
And it was nice to have that kind of little team, and we all kind of were very passionate about it. And then I have this kind of thing where I just work myself into the ground and burn myself
That
out.
doesn't sound like you.
No, yeah. So I kind of did that because I was trying to like do a bit of online and build that whilst managing the PT business. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, weird cycle. And
but it's all got you where you're at today.
yeah. So did that, and then I got to like 25. I'd like moved back in with my dad because I sold the place I had at the time with my ex, and it was just like moved back in with my dad, and I kind of had this weird feeling of just like, is this going to be my life for the rest of my life kind of thing? Like I'd done men's physique, I'd done some strongman stuff. Like I went from 100 kilos down to 82, which was wild.
That was back to back, yeah?
Yeah. So I went up to 100 kilos, and this is when I was like at my strongest.
Yeah.
And then I'd been to like it was Eric Helms and Dr. Mike Zordos strength and physique seminar in London. And it was all about body composition and fat loss and like competing. And I was just like men's physique. I was just like, well, what's the point of learning all this stuff? I'm not going to use it, right? And I was like, I can't coach people through this if I haven't done it myself. And that's kind of always been my thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not going to coach anyone through anything that I haven't done myself, right? Yeah. So even from a nutritional standpoint, I tried everything back in the day.
What's the silliest thing you've tried?
Probably the bulletproof coffee.
Ah, really? Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty fucking dumb.
Yeah, I got around that for a bit.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the silliest thing that I've done.
What else? The water loading? Yeah, water loading. So I did that when I first went to compete, and oh God, I felt bad. Like, so it's where you like literally like drink like 10 liters of water a day to like flood your system, and then you dehydrate yourself, stop drinking water. Fuck me, did I feel bad. Like I think my blood pressure must have been negligible, and I was just like dizzy as fuck. Like every time I stood up, like it was like, what is going on?
You gotta fucking grind, mate. Gotta grind.
Yeah, all that. Fasting cardio was a bit like, did that back in the day. Keto, intermittent fasting, pretty much every nutritional thing that we say to our clients is not necessarily going to get you a result. I've done it or tried it at some point. I've done carb cycling. I've done every kind of thing in the sun back in the day because it was like apparent.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know now because of that as well too.
Yeah,
I've
100%.
Some stupid shit as well.
Yeah. I mean, again, experimenting I think is something that gets lost a little bit because if you haven't got your own experience on it, you're just reading it off the back of a paper or someone said it.
Yeah.
It's just like you don't really have your own opinion.
No.
Whereas like if you've actually gone through it yourself, it's just like that opinion is going to be more valid because it's just like, well, I did this and this is on how it made me feel. Yeah. This is how it affected my performance. Yeah. And this is the result I got off the back of it. All right. And then I tried this approach and this was better because of this. Yeah. Right. And that kind of like evidence is going to just be so much better than just like, oh, well, keto shit because, you know, calorie deficits work regardless. It's like, well, actually, do you know how it makes you feel?
Yeah.
No? Okay, well, shut the fuck up. Yeah. Right?
And also, like, are you doing keto and you're trying to train 7 times a week for 2 hours?
Correct.
Okay, that might be shit, but for someone that it might give really mad brain function to and they train 2 to 3 times a week and
exactly
might be excellent for them as well too.
Exactly,
like,
man.
You don't know that if you're like, oh, I looked at that paper and that said shit, so I didn't look at the context, so and I don't want to understand the context. Dumb.
Yeah, well, that's it, right? And I mean, like the then journey of me going from 100 kilos to 82, 18 kilos. I dropped it over like 6 months. So I did like I went pretty hard at the start, like 3 months, and then had like a few weeks diet break, and then went down for the second half, 12 weeks, and it was just like I was shredded. Yeah, like probably the leanest I've ever been in my life.
Leaner then what, I remember when was it like 2020 when you started working over at Newtown? You were peeled then.
I was, yes, but that was just running around like a headless chicken and doing too much work and not enough time to eat enough food. Yeah, probably. I mean, that will pretty much burn me out again. But
that was a stress shed.
That was an accidental stress shed. Whereas actually doing it well, where I was actually lifting and strong, like I've never been as lean as that. Yeah. I am going to try and get lean this year. For a bit of a photo shoot because again I haven't really dipped my toe in that side of things in a long time, and now my knowledge and approach to things is different, and it'll be interesting just to see what I can do this time with a different approach, which is more of a kind of experiment just to take myself through that process. Yeah, absolutely. It's been a long time since I've done it myself, so we're going to do it again. But
what are you looking to drop?
I don't know. It's one of those where I don't want to say numbers. Like
Yeah.
I sit around about 93, 94 at the moment. I am pushing I'm going to push up a little bit more. Like my training hasn't been that consistent since before Christmas.
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of like push it back up again, and then look to probably, I don't know, if I can get down to like 84, 85, like for me.
Fucking shredded there.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
That will be like thick skin lean again, which should be fun.
And that will look very big as well.
Yeah. Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it's again, I don't know because
Yeah.
it's been a while since I've done a proper diet where I've got like that lean again.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see what happens. It'll be
Yeah.
fun. I say it'll be fun. It won't be fun. Dieting's not fun. Yeah. But I think it'll be interesting to see what I look like these days getting that lean again.
Yeah. Fair.
Because obviously I was down, like when I was at Newtown, I was sitting around about, I think my leanest, I even got down to around about 81 at one point.
Yeah.
Which is low.
Yeah.
But since then, I've put on a lot more muscle mass, being less stressed and training better and all the things.
You don't want to go near that 80 kilo, below 80 kilo mark.
Oh, I don't know. We can dip our toe in a little bit there, see what happens.
I don't think you would be able. Do you think you'd be able to get to 80? You'd feel like death.
I would feel like death, but I don't know. It
All for the shreds.
It becomes one of those things where it's just like, I want to look a little bit more. Like, how disgusting can I look? Like, you know, when you're getting that lean and people are like looking at you weird, just like, is he gonna die from a paper cut?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, all right, cool, yeah, this is weird. And when you can start like pulling your skin out and just like doing the stretch thing, it's just like, all right, that's when you know your dick's skin lean.
And you just look like you're pumped. To the normal person, it looks like you're pumped all the time. Just you have that many veins everywhere.
Yeah,
you feel like shit. And
you feel like shit, and it's just like
fuck,
you feel like you don't even like lift because you're that small in a t-shirt until you get your clothes off and you get a pump. You're like, okay, cool, I look sick. But the rest of the time, just like, I don't even look like I lift anymore. Like, what is going on?
I had an experience because at the back end of 2020, I got pretty lean after I tore my hamstring as well too, and I think I was down to hovering around 80, maybe sometimes a little bit under. And I remember one day I got in the lift in my apartment building. I felt like shit. I was like, I'm going to see how far I can push it. And just for no reason, but I felt just those flat days where you're like, I'm not in, it's a weird experience when you get that lean because obviously your mind plays tricks on you and your energy is just not there. And I got in the lift and this guy's like, I just come from the gym and I did 20 minutes of cardio. That was it. I was not pumped at all. He's like, fuck me, good pump. And I was like, oh, mad. I feel good about myself now, but I feel shit as well because I'm so tired.
It's a weird place to be, man. Like, getting lean is like, it's good. And you like, again, like seeing that change in your body. I think that this is where dieting for me is like, I enjoy the process.
Yeah.
Right. And like for me, even stepping on stage when I did the men's physique, it was all about the process. I didn't enjoy the process of stepping on stage. And the day, it was just weird. It was like all kinds of weird with gas chambers going off and blah, 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 when you get sprayed with a tan.
Yeah.
But the actual process of taking my body through that and seeing how your body changes in terms of look, body composition, everything else, it's wild.
Yeah. And particularly doing it time after time and knowing what you can do better each time. And it's never easy. It's a relatively simple process, we know, to a certain extent. But how can you do it better and maybe a little bit less cardio this time or more food this time or, you know, whatever it might be.
Well, that's it. And I think like even I've got clients now like Amy that's been with me for like 7-8 years, like back when I was in the UK.
Yeah.
Right. It's like every year we do a cut.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like, you know, we've got her strong, we got a cut, and like every year we do it better and she looks better.
Yeah.
Right. And you learn every time you diet, you learn more from it.
Yeah.
And I think people don't necessarily, again, give themselves that grace of time to just repeat the same thing each year and just think about the things you learn from it.
Yeah.
How you can do things better, make yourself feel better and all those things. And it's like the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Yeah.
Right? Because you learn to handle things better and make better choices and decisions with how you manage dieting in itself.
And all of it, that's the whole process, hey? Like you should be getting better the more you learn.
Yeah.
The more you deal with a certain scenario or situation, you should be able to do that better the next time and the next time and the next time.
100%, man.
You know, the more you do it. So where are we up to there? So you were just talking about the show that you did. You went from 100 kilos down to 80 something.
Yeah.
And then you said you were about 25 then?
Yeah. But I think it was about 24.
Yeah.
And then it was like, basically moved back in with dad. And at that point, I was like a bit unsure about life, right? I was like, I had a good PT business, right? But I was just like, in this town in the countryside, like Cotswolds. I was just like, is this going to be my life for the rest of my life? Right. I kind of like, I'm a relatively ambitious guy. I wanted to grow, continue to learn. Relatively. And I was just like, all right, there's more. There's definitely more out there. So let's go explore that. And I started working down a specialist strength and conditioning facility called Starks Fitness, which was down at Harbourside, Bristol. And there were some really fantastic coaches there. And I think putting myself into an environment where there was better coaches was definitely where I wanted to kind of put myself, right? Because it's just like be around people you can learn from, train with, and kind of like learn different skill sets. Like there were some few guys there that they kind of were like hybrid athletes that would do like a mix of like Cali and kind of power building and that kind of stuff, which was fun. And that's where I met Tom Ballack, who's now head coach of Bunker, etc. and Surrey Hills. And yeah, we kind of gelled, had a lot of fun, and partied a little bit, which, you know, if you spend time with Ballack, that's kind of what we do. And he was like, oh, I'm going to Australia at the end of the year. And I kind of just had one of those moments where I'd come home from a long day of PT, and I just sat there and I was just like, just had one of those fuck it moments where I was just like, I literally just pulled out my laptop, Googled flights, and just booked it and sent it to Ballack. I was just like, yeah, I'm getting on the same flight. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I'm doing this. He was like, all right, fuck, cool. And yeah, just kind of like packed everything away, sold everything, like, and was just like, let's just go on an adventure.
Yeah.
And it was a good adventure, right? I'm glad I did. Like, I think at that point I was not lacking zest for life, but I was definitely wanting more of a challenge, a bit more adventure, and I think just explore. And I think you grow when you do something like that massively.
Particularly if you're aware enough that things are starting to get stale, because you know that, well, if you just continue down that path, it's probably not going to get any more exciting than what it is. No. You might have little highs, but it's probably just going to come back to the staleness. So,
well, that's it. And I think the scary thing for me was like, all right, if I keep doing the same thing, where am I going to be in a year? I'm in the same place, right? And yes, that's not a bad place to be. You have a good business, you have a roof over the head and all the things, right? You're earning good money, but I don't know. Again, for me, fulfillment's a big thing. Like, money is never, like, yes, it is a driver to an extent, but I think how you feel in the inside is the most important thing, like fulfillment and purpose. And it was just like, I've kind of ticked this box now, and I need to go and grow and continue to kind of like challenge myself in different ways and go on a bit of a kind of like journey for myself. And that's where Australia came. Spent 3 months in Bundaberg picking lemons and stacking boxes of nuts and getting pissed, as you do as a backpacker.
And then Bundaberg rum up there, mate.
Yeah, and then came back to Sydney and obviously started working at FP. And that was incredible because FP, I think, you know, it's an incredible company. There was a lot of amazing coaches. Obviously, Matt Duncan, head coaching there, you know, fantastic guy. And it was like, it was a fantastic experience. And I think coming from the coaching background I had and walking into FP with that, and obviously, you know, like yourselves and, you know, Chris Bay, the Bens, and all those guys that were kind of across that company, it was such a good community and culture. Yeah. Right, and we worked hard, we had a lot of fun, we trained hard, and it was just like a really good kind of like period of my life. And for me starting my journey in Australia, it couldn't have been better.
Yeah.
Right, and even just learning to be around or in Sydney is a different type of clientele to kind of what I was used to in the UK. Right, you got a lot more high stress people coming in. You got, like, again, a very mixed bag of clientele coming through the door, but also like some really good athletes as well. And being exposed to that has been great for my coaching journey and understanding how to work with different populations. Because my clientele back in the UK, it was like mainly just kind of mums and people who wanted to lose weight and just general kind of like older people, kind of getting them fit and strong and stuff like that. Whereas like here, you got younger generation, you got athletes, you got a bigger mix of people to train. Which has been good.
Yeah, that's one thing for me as well. And I had a conversation with Maddie on here about it in terms of the training everybody and anybody early on. If there's anybody out there that wants to be a PT, take on everybody that you can, because you're going to learn. If you only have one subset of clients or one niche of clients early on, and that's all you do, you just don't know what else is out there. You know, if you think about all the clients from however old they are to however young they are, to who's been injured, to who's done a prep, to who's done a show, to who's played a sport, to whatever it might be, then...
Dude, I could tell you endless stories of clients, right? We could just sit here and talk about the clients we've worked with.
Yeah.
Right? I remember meeting an old lady in a supermarket, Sainsbury's back in the UK, and taking her food shopping.
Yeah.
Right? Because she was overweight and didn't know what to eat.
Yeah.
And I literally went around the supermarket with her and did a food shop with her.
Yeah.
Right. And it was just like, this is what we need to eat and this is why. And kind of, I like spent one of the sessions with her just going around the supermarket. Right. Wild.
Yeah.
And this was before we had access to the apps and things we do now.
Yeah.
So it was just like, that was how I coached her on nutrition.
Yeah.
And it was just like, that just doesn't happen anymore.
No.
Right.
No. And I think it's a lot to do the new online coach that just is like, I'm an online coach now and I don't want to do the face-to-face or minimal the face-to-face. And then people just trying to niche and stuff like that. And, just to be like, I just want to train this client, It just doesn't exist.
The whole niching thing, I get it, but also I don't at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I have been in the industry a long time, and I think it's just like, yes, niching down and just like having a niche, but like that thing is always changing.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like, I look at the people I work with now, and I do work with a lot of coaches now.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say I necessarily have a specific niche.
Yeah.
It's no different to probably the people you train. It's just like different kind of people.
Yeah.
Right? But in terms of niche, yeah.
There's a similar goal, but because you've worked with such a big, broad, you could niche if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But you do also then cut yourself off. You're like, if I only work with this client, I cut that client off.
I also just get the ick with most populations in fitness. Like,
Yeah,
right? If you go too down the rabbit hole of one population, like we'll just use bodybuilding because it's easiest to shit on bodybuilders, right?
Yeah.
It's just like you go down the bodybuilding crowd, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like optimal wank off of exercises and just like too much down that rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, or you go on like the CrossFit side, and it's just like, all right, cool, we're getting a little bit wild out here, throwing all kinds of shit above our heads.
Yeah.
And every niche I look at the fitness industry, I don't necessarily agree with everything they do.
You just can't.
And you can, right? And I think that's where, like, again, I'm sure MD's talked about this as well. It's kind of like being that expert generalist, right?
Yeah.
Where it's just like you can kind of dip your toes into different areas of training and modalities and niches and whatever it is, and learn different things from those and kind of like take it back to your own style.
Yeah.
And then you have different tools in your toolbox to kind of like train with your clients, create different skill sets, programs, and just have that there to make the training process more enjoyable.
Yeah. And
right?
and inevitably one of those clients that you train in your niche is going to be injured. Inevitably they're going to get older. Inevitably they're going to go through, they might want to do an event. Do you just bin that client, or do you keep them long term and then they want to come back to your quote unquote niche or whatever? But if you don't know how to do all those things, and I think a lot of what we do, there's underlying principles and concepts, and once you can understand those principles and concepts or whatever they might be, and they're always kind of in flux and they change a little bit, but programming is very similar, nutrition is very similar, there's key concepts around it. It's okay, well, what's that tool for that person, what's this tool for that person?
Well, that's it. It's like, if you look at fundamentally what a coach is, we're problem solvers. Right? You come to us and we solve your problems, and I think the more you expose yourself to different areas of things, then the better you are going to be at solving those problems, because you're going to have so many more different tools. You're going to have it that's going to be more specific to the person that's in front of you, and you're going to understand that a lot better. Right? And it's like, the quicker you can solve those problems, the quicker you can get a result. Probably the happier the client's going to be.
And the longer they're going to stay with you and talk good about you and refer you and all that sort of stuff, and make the whole process enjoyable and all that stuff. So I guess on that, we're kind of up to speed almost where you're at now. So I guess you touched on a little bit about the clients that you work with and where you're at the moment. Just do you want to go into a little bit more depth of that? Well, what's a typical coaching process look like with you?
Cool. Yeah. So I mean, now where I'm at, like, I guess for me, I'm majority online. I have still a few I train in person, and I also write articles as well for Crunch Fitness Australia.
Cool.
Which has been I've been doing that over the last year, which has been cool. Writing a couple of articles over the last year.
How'd that come about?
So one of my old clients worked in SEO marketing. I've always enjoyed writing as a format, and she kind of approached me and was just like, "Hey, like, so Crunch Fitness, the copywriter they currently have is not the best. Would you want to do it?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah, 100%." Like, I want to enjoy writing, and also she was just like, in terms of your fitness knowledge, You know, it's not going to really much out. And I looked at the Crunch Fitness article, so I was like, yeah, there's a lot we can do here. So yeah, just kind of did it, and that came about. So that's been kind of fun because that's, again, it's more of a passion thing. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say I do it because I signed an NDA, but anyway, I do.
I'm sure the audience is not big enough.
Yeah, we're all good.
I joked about the fan mail at the start.
They're not gonna come after me. But yeah, so that's been fun. And then coaching process. So it's like, all right, now, very much big on the assessment consultation process, right? Everything starts with that. It's like, again, the education I've done over recent years is like being able to ask better questions and really dive into the problems. And my first point of call is fix dysfunctions, solve health problems. So we'll look at a lot of your biomarkers. You're having digestive stress, like what does that look like? Where's your resting heart rate at? Where's your HRV at? Where's your blood pressure at? Like, let's look at the fundamental biomarkers and then let's look at how your body's functioning, right? Do you have pain? Have you got adequate internal or external rotation, hip extension, all the things, shoulder function, shoulder flexion, extension, and external rotation, all of those things, right? It's like, all right, we want a functioning human. And then once we have that, it's like, all right, cool. If you build, again, it's like building the foundations of a house. You're not going to build it on a bed of sand. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong when it comes to their fitness journey. It's like they don't spend the time building the foundations of the house. And then they wonder why they get to a certain point and they either can't make progress or they get injured. It's like, so that's the fundamental rule I have when it comes to coaching.
When you're focusing on those things, obviously a general question, but how long roughly would you focus on those things for? How long's a piece of string?
Yeah, dude, it really depends. Like, I've had a few coaches come on board with me and it's less like, we still strip things back to basics, but I think with coaches, it's just like their training frequency is going to be higher, so they're going to be training like 5 times a week, right? It's like we can kind of hide the vegetables and the spaghetti sauce a little bit with them and like make their programs run a little bit longer because I know they're going to do it, but also it means that like they're going to probably adhere and be compliant a lot quicker than like Gen Pop people. So in terms of time, really depends, and it depends on how fucked up this person is, right? It's like, all right, if they can't get that arm over the head and they're just like, they've got very limited range of motion or whatever it might be, we don't know. But most people who are able to adhere to and be compliant, it's like, all right, we can kind of fix those issues in the first kind of like couple of months, I'd say. And then it's like, all right, cool. What do we want to do now, right? Do we want to kind of build strength, build muscle, like whatever it might be? I guess the hardest people or the hardest clients I've had to work with have been the ones that have more health issues where we go a little bit deeper. I think we're going to touch on this later on when we get to stress. But when we get looking at kind of like the longer term health concerns caused by stress, inflammation, all those things, like those are the people that are going to be the hardest to work with because they're going to take the longest to fix those problems. Right. And that's comes with a lot of lifestyle change, and that comes with a lot of behavioral change stuff, and that is going to be the most challenging transformation for these people. Right, the coaches I work with and the athletes I work with, it's just like, cool, let's fix your problems and let's fucking go. Right, whereas the people with more deeper level of health issues, that's going to be the part that takes the time to fix.
Coaches can be frustrating as fuck too.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm not going to say anything on this podcast that may like shit on anyone, or
they can. I've had work with my fair share, and sometimes they're the most frustrating. But
it's just like, it's almost like they want to have their cake and eat it, and it's just like they think because they're a coach, they're like fucking Superman. It's just like rules still apply to you, right? This is kind of, it doesn't matter whether you're a coach or not. It doesn't change, right? You can't have your cake and eat it. Like, quite literally, it's just like the results you're going to get is going to be the same as your level of commitment to the behaviors and actions that are going to get you the result, right? And it doesn't matter, right? You can't
cheat any of it.
You can't cheat it, right? Yeah, they still want to. And then they get frustrated when they don't get the result. And he's just like, I told you this. Like, what? Like, I'm not a fucking wizard. It still applies.
Anyway, enough said there. It's a hard thing with the lifestyle and the behavioral change stuff, because if someone's in such a bad state of health, there's a lot of deep-seated things to get someone out of that, and it's a very, very challenging and long process to get there. But it's definitely worth it. And on the other side of that is the things that people want. It's just that I think we live in the McDonald's generation of we wanted it yesterday,
Dude,
and that's a big part of the issue is, everything's so easily accessible. And it's so funny. It's so interesting watching what people will, one, focus on, and two, ignore when you like, okay, these are the things. that we're going to work on to get you where you want to go, but I want to focus over here. Yeah. As a coach, we'll literally never tell you anything that's going to get you, that we think will get you a worse result. You know? And I understand that it's hard for some people to see that but
yeah, I don't know. It's we're in this generation looking for the silver bullet.
yeah,
Right, where it's just like, all right, cool. What's the magic thing?
Yeah.
Right, like give me the quick fix. Right, whatever works, and it's just like consistency. Right,
yeah,
simple, basic consistency over time. You can't beat it.
no.
Right, but unfortunately, we're always looking for that, and then when we don't get the result, we're just like, like what are other people doing that I'm not? And they're just doing the same thing for longer, and repeating the same thing without kind of derailing themselves for whatever reason, right? And that's all it is.
Yeah.
But people still think there's a silver bullet.
Yeah.
And like having done the bodybuilding thing, done like, you know, got really strong, it's just like, it's just where I've consistently shown up and done the work. And like the clients I've worked with that have got the best results when it comes to, if we look at kind of body transformations and things like that, guess what? They tick every single box week in, week out, day in, day out, and they don't come to me with excuses.
Yeah.
Right. And like, yes, there is an element of kind of, I guess, like OCD and whatever, like, oh, it's too obsessive. It's just like, but in the end of the day, that's the level of commitment you need to then get the expectation of that result.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the difference between like people's mindset when it comes to this thing is just like, you know, matching their expectations with what they expect to get versus their actions.
Yeah.
The people who understand that the behaviors and actions is what they need to do to get that are the people that are really going to get the result that they want.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think a lot of times they'll like the idea of the result and the outcome more than they will actually want to go after it, because at the end of the day, your actions will ultimately dictate whether you get that outcome or
100%.
result. And if you're saying that you do, there's change talk there. If you're saying that you do want to achieve something, and that's definitely part of it, but there has to be at some point we have to put things in motion. And you know, it's quite common that you hear clients, oh, you know, I was busy last week, I had this thing with work, and you know, I had to go out on the weekend. It's not normal. But then the next week the same conversation comes up and the same conversation comes up, and it's like, well, okay, well, these things are normal. You've got a life, you're going to live around it. And it's challenging. I don't disagree that any of it is challenging, but some people can have more things that are more complex that they need to focus on. But in practice, a lot of the process is simple. It's turning up every day and giving yourself that chance to.
We just live in a world of too many distractions, right? Yeah. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
Right, because people aren't able to shut themselves off from those distractions and just kind of focus on the basics. I think I was lucky to an extent of growing up in like a small town on the countryside, right? It was just like I just did the same thing every day. Yeah. I would get up, I'd go for a 45-minute walk, I would train my clients, I would eat my food. Yeah, you know what I mean? It was just like I did that repeatedly for 5-6 years, and guess what? I got really strong, really jacked.
Yeah.
Cool, good.
You read a lot, and you know.
Yeah, I read a lot. It was quiet, so all I did was spend time in nature. I read a lot of books, and it was just like I spent a lot of that time learning. And to an extent, I do miss that because just being in Sydney, there's just noise everywhere, right? And it's really hard to find that, I guess, like stoic life here, where you're just still. And I do miss that about being in the countryside. Yeah,
and just having that time and to be, you know, you can create that time here, obviously, and you know, people are still being successful with it, but yeah, it does sound nice. I went to Orange just recently in Central West New South Wales by myself, and I just got an Airbnb because I took 2 weeks off, and I was like, I need to just get out and go ride my bike and lift some weights and read some books. And it was so nice to just be out in the countryside, reading a book for an hour or 2 in the afternoon and just having that shut down.
Yeah, it's important.
I guess while we're on that then, mate, we're sort of alluding to the stress and some of the things you focus on. So talk to me about stress. What do you think people need to know more about stress? Everything. It's the silent killer.
Mate, stress is, the silent killer, right? And it's like one of the biggest things that people kind of ignore, right? And like if we can dive deep on this or not too deep, we'll see how we go.
As deep as you want, mate. We can go.
Like if we look at stress, right? It's like your nervous system. So autonomic nervous system, what that look like? We've got your sympathetic on one side, you've got your parasympathetic on the other, okay? So sympathetic is going to be your more stressed state, and we look at like what that fundamentally is being catabolic or in a catabolic state, which is basically taking big things and breaking them down. Other side of that, you got parasympathetic, which is obviously more your anabolic state, which is obviously taking small things and making them big, which is a really easy way to, I guess, understand it. But when we look at stress, like usually people look at stress and they kind of see it as a negative, but it's not, right? The negative comes from being in a chronic state of stress. And because of, I guess, today's world and how we live, there is more chronic stress in how we live, right? Because back in the, I guess, the caveman days, right, we would get a stressor, which would be like, I don't know, like a fucking saber-toothed tiger, and we would spear the fuck out of it. It would die, and then, like, cool, stress is gone. Good. All right. Whereas today, in today's world, it's like, all right, we wake up, we have interest rates, we have like wars going on, we have fucking, I don't know, rental crises, Sydney rent, we have social media, we have like constant like stimulation and all these things which are stressors that causes us to be in this state of chronic stress. And that's where the problem comes, because if we look at like, I guess, what that is going to be doing at a biochemical level, it's okay, cool. That's going to cause the hypothalamus to kind of like go into a little bit of overdrive. All right, what's it going to do? That's going to kind of have downstream effect then on your adrenal glands, which are going to pump your cortisol up, and then it's also going to pump up your thyroid and pump up your testosterone in men, and then estrogen in women, which doesn't sound like a bad thing, right? The bad thing happens when you're in that state for a long time, because then what happens is the hypothalamus goes, we're doing too much here. We've got to shut all these things down. Then everything gets shut down. And what does that do? That drives the sympathetic state to go into kind of an overdrive state where you are just chronically in the state of cortisol and high drive, right?
And in that state, you're then tired and you dump a heap of coffee on top of it. And
exactly,
you don't
right?
sleep and, you know.
Exactly, right? And the thing that people don't really talk about too much is something called the conserved transcriptional response to adversity, right? So when this basically gets cranked up, like this is when it's going to crank up epigenetics and also our immune response.
Okay, yeah.
And that's when we start causing these kind of long-term health issues, right? We're going to drive up, we're going to see it drive up in kind of like inflammation. We're going to see an increased risk of cardiac diseases and things like cardiovascular disease and all those things. And that's when we're going to see a decreased antiviral ability to kind of like fight off viruses, things like that, right? Which is going to be bad for health.
Immune system's in the bin.
Yeah, immune system's fucked, right? And it's just like, all right, well, what do we do, right? It's like, how do we get out of that? You can't out squat a sympathetic state.
Unfortunately, I've tried.
Yeah, well, that's right. I've tried too. If it doesn't work, you just burn out and blow your systems up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And the squatting is a stressor as well too.
Well, that's what I mean. Training is stress, and right. And most people think of training as going to be a stress relief, which, if you train correctly, it can be. And this is where, again, like, you know, talking to Luke Lehman, is like you got your least mode to beast mode, right? And it's just like knowing when to kind of go least mode and pull back on things, and then when to go beast mode, and making sure that we're not kind of doing things wrong to a point where it's like affecting our health long term.
I think before you go there, one thing on that, in that training is a stressor. When you objectively look at these things, I think people have a hard time with the subjectivity and the objectivity of stuff. We're looking at saying training is a stressor. Objectively, it is a stressor. But subjectively, it makes you potentially less stressed if you get your training, feel less stressed.
Yes.
But if you're in that really, really, really stressed state and then you dump, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
And then it just fucks the whole show up. But sorry, continue.
Yeah, and then like if we look at it from a weight gain obesity standpoint, right? Because that is fundamentally, like, as what we do as coaches for the most part is like getting people to lose weight, right? It's the biggest problem in the world right now, right? And it's just like, everyone's just like, oh, just eating calorie deficit. It's like, it's not that fucking simple. No. It's just not, right? Because if we're constantly in this high sympathetic drive, like catecholamines are going to be kind of increased, right? Which is going to decrease your insulin receptor function, right? Well, what does that do? Okay, that's going to drive up your blood glucose, right? If we think about what that's doing, then glucose isn't going to be transported to the things that need to be using glucose, right? Yeah. Gonads, what are they? Primary fuel source is glucose. Yeah. All right, so if you're not getting glucose transported to your gonads, what's going to happen? Testosterone's going to shut down, right? Man, that's going to fuck you up. Guess what? I've been there, done it, all right? It fucked me up. Yeah. Again, I had the testosterone of a 90-year-old man and felt like Didier dog shit, right? It was awful. Yeah. Because I was completely screwed, right? And like when you start to understand what's gone wrong and why, and I guess the reason why I'm so passionate about learning more about this side of it and kind of going deep on biochemistry a little bit more, it's because this stuff is not being talked about, right? And I think fitness can be very much at the kind of 1% of like high end fitness and competing and strength and everything else. It's just like, all right, well, what about the health side of things?
Yeah.
Right. Because at the end of the day, like most of the clients we're going to work with, we want them to be healthy, and I want to be healthy for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And have it. And it's just like a good analogy when it comes to this stuff. It's like when this stuff happens and the catecholamines go up and then the insulin receptors goes down. Like imagine the Uber driver like basically delivering the pizzas around, and someone has taken the battery out of the doorbell. So the pizza guy is going to ring the doorbell, nothing's happening, and then you put in the pizzas at the front, and what happens is it gets left there, right? That's basically what's happening to your blood glucose, all right? And it's just sitting there and not being transported or taken into the right place. And what does that do? Leads to wake.
Float around in the bloodstream.
Float around in the bloodstream, and then it's going to get everything from a negative standpoint go up, inflammation goes up, all those things. It's just like when you look at the health market side of it, it's like, all right, cool, fuck, we got some issues here.
Yeah, and then if you can't get that into the muscle, the carbohydrates that you eat are just going to, fuck you up even more. Then I need a low carbohydrate. Like some instances it's needed, but then it's like, I can't handle carbs,
Exactly.
We're going closer to that diabetes and all those sorts of things.
Exactly, right? And it's just like, all right, cool. Now we've got something we can kind of work with, because if we know what's causing this, if it is a stress thing, we need to work backwards. Right? And I think like the more clients I work with and the more I understand this stuff, the better, because it allows me then to take a bit more of a kind of holistic approach to how we approach things, especially when it comes to their training program and everything else, and like even nutrition, right? It's like, all right, cool, we're going to probably out for a low carb diet, right? Because it's going to be probably most beneficial to you if you're super high stressed. Because putting carbs in you right now, not a good idea. Right? And then it's like, all right, we're being more prescriptive in everything we're doing. That's going to get you a better result. You're going to feel better, and also your health is going to be looked after first. And again, that's the kind of fundamental rule.
So I thought it was just a calorie fucking deficit, mate.
If only it was. I mean, look, we can get onto that topic of calorie deficit. I mean, it's just like, oh, this food is better for fat loss than this first. It's like, oh, we're missing the whole fucking point.
We are, and I think that applies. The CFD, the calorie fucking deficit, applies if all things are at a baseline. But if you don't have a baseline, put someone into a massive calorie deficit when they're stressed to the gills. They're going to feel even, they're not going to lose weight. They're already, and they probably are already in a calorie deficit as well too. So their metabolic rate is so low because they're running constantly off stress hormones.
100%.
So they don't need that much. They don't need that much food.
Well, I'd say
they feel they don't need much food, but
I'd even say like almost 90% of the people I work with, they walk through the door and they're not eating enough. Right? And they're in a state of low energy availability, which is a state of like cortisol is going to go up again, like digestive's going to go down, everything else, and it's just like inflammation's up, everything, and it's just like, cool, we need to get you to eat more first. Right? They're like, well, what? And I'm like, yeah, dude, you're fucked. Right? And part of your stress is going to be coming from your lack of nutrition. Right?
And as well too, you have more stress if you are in that obviously malnourished state essentially. So, but you're going to not be aware of it because your brain function is not going to be anywhere near where it should be. Because in that instance, I think a lot of people are aware of like the fight or flight. It's survival at that point. Your body's just like, fuck, I'm gonna just down-regulate everything I can to stay alive, and it will do that, and then you'll get used to feeling stressed and shit, but that stress and shit will feel normal, and you won't know what that feels like until you start to probably eat a little bit more and pull that stress out and all those sorts of things. So even that calorie deficit is a stressor as well too,
100%,
in its pure sense.
A good quote I heard a long time ago was like, people don't know how bad they feel until they feel good. Right, and like they've got no comparable until they actually feel good, and they're like, oh wow. And then even like, I guess for us as coaches, it's like, because we're so self-aware with this stuff and we've done it for a long time, when we feel bad, we're like, oh fuck, like I have 1 or 2 beers and I'm like, oh god, what the fuck is this? Right, whereas like most people,
I can't finish a beer, mate.
I can't anymore. It's terrible. But yeah, we just are so self-aware of how it makes us feel, right? And like having that in tuneness with our bodies and everything we put in it. Now, like for me, and like even food intolerances, again, another one. Right. If you have someone that has a food intolerance to something, right? If you measure their heart rate before that food, then after it, you're going to see that increase. Right. And again, it's just like people aren't aware of the food they're putting in their mouth and how it makes them feel. And this is like, I'm again very hyper aware of things now I eat. And I can tell if this is causing inflammation just by like how I feel after it, which is, I know it's a little bit weird and geeky, but I think when you've been doing this a long time, you figure it out
Yeah.
for yourself and what works and what doesn't.
Well, knowledge is power at the end of the day, yeah. So the more, and people want the power to make change, yeah. So, well, then you need to get a better education. I know it's easy as a coach to say that because we are on the other side of it, where we do spend a lot of time working with a lot of people. But our job as a coach is to ideally get people healthy so they can do it for a long period of time. And it's a funny thing. I understand it. People say they want a goal, and then you ask them to, what they're prepared to do, and if it's track all the biomarkers. That biomarkers gives you the insights, which then you can make more informed decisions of okay, measuring your heart rate when you eat a certain food. That's a biomarker that is gonna help you make a better decision, which is gonna make you feel better long term. I was listening to some people talking in the office out here earlier, and they we're talking about what they're going to have for lunch, and someone was like, "Oh, I should have this because I can't, this upsets my stomach." And then they kind of laughed at it. There was a bit of back and forth, and like, "Oh yeah, I shouldn't eat this because it upsets my stomach, but I kind of do anyway." And then, and then
I know, it's just like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make the drink. It's just like it's just.
Rob and I say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't kick him in. So
I like that, yeah, 100%. And it's just like people are just not so well. They just ignore the signs, right?
Yeah.
And that's the baffling thing for me. It's just like when you put your like finger in, a flame when you were younger and it hurt, you didn't put it back in, right? Yet people still do this every single day when it comes to their nutritional choices and everything else, and it's just like wild. And well, again, you've probably seen it on social media. Eddie Abu, have you seen him floating around?
Maybe.
He's like this bodybuilder back in the UK, and he's just like, this fucking food is shit, and just like all the processed food. And he's just like, I think he called James Smith. What was it like the Dumber Grade or something like that? Just like, these guys spouting calorie fucking deficit. Just eat normal fucking healthy food. Unprocessed. It's like, you fuckers like eating squares bars and all the rest of it. And it's just like, like he has a point.
Yeah.
Right? And like you gotta hate him a little bit because I think again, demonizing food, like there is an element of food that is really important for social connection.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think, taking that away is not a good way to live. And I think, there has to be an element of not 80-20, but like not restricting yourself to an extent.
Yeah.
But normalizing the fact that processed food and high sugary foods and things like that is good for you. It's not. Really,
you can have it, but it's not health. In some regards, it can be health promoting from the standpoint of the social.
Well, that's
connection.
it, right?
Yeah.
The social connection element, and like if you really enjoy that thing, and there's like you're very present with it, and you can enjoy that and things like that, and even to an extent, and we kind of like again when Luke presented on stress in Sydney. Like the way you think,
stress presentation.
Very funny. But again, like the way you think about that food as you're eating it makes a big impact, right? So if you think this food is going to be good for you, then it will have a different impact for you if you think it's bad for you, right? And just that the psychological connection between like how you think about that food and how it's going to go into you is going to be really important to how the effect it has on you long term.
And that's where I think having a period where you look at these, the metrics. It's effort initially, but getting the metrics, getting the data allows you to have more power over it. I've had conversations with a client. He wouldn't come around to the idea that he kind of almost didn't want to believe in calories. And I was like, it's not all about calories, but it is the agreed upon measurement that we use for the value of energy in food. And that's it. We don't need to attach any more meaning to it than other than that. And we don't need to attach emotion to it because that's that. We don't go, I'm really emotional that in Australia we use dollars and in the UK they use pounds. No one gets emotional about that. And that's kind of what we know, that when we put calories in, it doesn't work like a bomb calorimeter and burn the food, but there's an agreed upon management there, and it's consistent within a certain degree. But anyway, so he wouldn't do that, and he wanted to get a little bit leaner, and then he would be like, "Can I have yogurt?" And he has no digestive issues, and I was like, "Yeah, it's fine. Like you can, He's like, "Well, how much can I have?" He's like, and he was kind of the way that he asked it, he was stressed about having yogurt. And I was like, yeah, just have it. You know, if we get a better idea of your calories, we could probably you can have heaps more of it probably.
Yeah.
And then not stress about it. I was like, how much are you having? Because he was stressed about it. He's like, oh, you'd have like maybe 2 or 3 tablespoons. I was like, mate, you've probably not even got 100 calories there, but you're stressed about it. And I was like, that stress response to that, because you don't have the knowledge about what something is, whatever that metric might be, creates then a negative effect on you eating that food.
Digestion, everything.
Which that can start to, particularly foods that are common allergens, then you can start to create like a stress response to that food, and then you can start to create some adverse digestion, and then start to create, you know, an intolerance or whatever it might be. But if we just have more knowledge around it, which we can.
Yeah, you know? And a lot of it is it's just not even. I guess it is knowledge to an extent, but it's also just being okay with the fact that no food is inherently bad, or labeling your food as inherently bad is bad. Like, there's going to be more nutrient-dense food and more foods that aren't nutrient-dense.
Yeah.
And like, as long as we predominantly focus on nutrient-dense foods,
cool.
Yeah. And whole foods, again, it's just like, all right, now and again you can have something that is a little less whole food.
Yeah.
Right. But again, everything is processed today.
Yeah.
Right. You can't get away from it. Yeah. And I'm actually going to do a post on it because I bought 3 different yogurts at the weekend. Because one of my clients asked me about like muscle gain, and he's like, you don't do much content on nutrition, and I don't, because I just don't want to be that guy of like start kind of like being on the internet with kind of, oh, this food is better or this food is worse and stuff like that. It's not really where I go. Yeah. But I'm going to do a post just talking about a kind of like what people think is healthy versus what is healthy. Yeah. Because again, it's just like, if you look at what most people think is healthy, it's like they'll go for the low calorie option. Yeah. Right. But if you look at kind of like this yogurt over here, which is higher calories, it's got less additives and things like that. And it's like 3 ingredients. Yeah. Guess what? This one's probably healthier, and it's got more kind of live like bacteria and things like that in it. So if we're looking at a health one, this is more, but it's going to have higher calories. Yeah. Whereas most people think this is kind of the healthy option, right? Yeah. And that's where people don't really kind of, they don't connect with their nutritional choices as much. Whereas like, if I don't care about calories, you know, if I'm in a period of just like maintaining on what, I don't necessarily look at my calories. Yeah. I just go, right, I'm going to focus on as much whole foods as I would, could probably kind of food sources, and then I'll have a thing now and again. Yeah. I know, like alpha burger, whatever it might be, right? Yeah. And not really worry too much. Yeah. And that's good. And then if I want to diet, then I'm going to look a little bit more at the calorie content. Yeah. And focus on that a bit more. Yeah.
But that also not having to worry about the calories as much is from seeing all that, you know, over. Whether you're a coach or not, if you were to track your nutrition and get those insights, then you can start to have so much more power over it.
Exactly.
And then those social situations I used to get stressed out about it, because like when I first started, I would be so far into, well, I can only eat these kind of foods and only for these amount of calories. So therefore anything else outside of that was deemed as be really, really high calorie. So then I just wouldn't eat those sorts of things. And then the more you start to understand, it's like, oh, I could have fucking eaten that food all the whole time.
I mean, I'd like to say I had a good relationship with food, but I really didn't for a long time. Yeah. I pretty much had an eating disorder through my younger years. Yeah. I guess more from the bodybuilding scene, to be honest, because it was just like, you know, super clean, restrict, and then guess what? You would have your fucking cheat day where it was like fucking free for all. Yeah. And I would just eat shit and then wake up on Monday feeling like shit and then be like, I've got to go do my fucking cardio. Yeah.
And from like a gut health standpoint, mate, so shit. I've just had a client, he would have a very similar approach, and I'm trying to get him up to a point where we're building his diet so we can then make a substantial cut to get him to get leaner. He's like, I've never eaten this much food before. And I was like, well, you have, because if you've been in that point where you're not at the body weight that you want, most of the time you might have been in a calorie deficit, but there's been a lot of time where you're way over. But he's also had some skin issues and things like that. And we do know that from a gut health standpoint, you know, that's going to be a massive thing.
Your external is very much a representation of your internal environment.
Yeah. And so now that he's got a more of a level playing field with a higher amount of calories than he's ever seen, or that he's ever eaten on a consistent basis, talking to him, he's got a lot of energy. You can see he's there more now than he was before on the 1500. and skin issues are starting to clean up, even though that he's eating more on a consistent basis. But he would have the big ups of the fuck it's, the cheat days and things like that.
Yeah.
And from a gut health standpoint, you might do good during the week, but then that lasts a long time after you've just dumped a couple thousand calories of
100% gut inflammation, everything else, right?
yeah, and that level playing field is massive, because then you can make change.
Yeah, you can. It's like change is hard, but you can make change.
Yeah, and everybody, I get it as well too, particularly being on the other side of it to a certain extent, where you think, and coming from being overweight like yourself as well, you think, oh, I can't get to that point where I can make change like that. I never thought that I would be able to, get lean on the amount of calories that I get lean on now and things like that.
100%, dude. Like, it's just, I was scared for a long time to, I guess, build.
Yeah.
And it was only then until like I had a coach kind of take me through it that I was like, okay, cool, I can do this.
Yeah.
Right. I was just like I was worried about regaining weight and getting fat again.
Yeah.
Right? And I think everyone's gone through that, right? If you've been overweight, it's like you're scared to then gain weight and eat more calories because you're like, I don't want to be fat again. And I get it.
Yeah,
100%.
so do I. Yeah.
It's like there's an element of that you got to kind of overcome that fear and be like, okay, no, I'm eating to fuel my body and fuel my performance, and just like detaching that emotional connection to that.
Yeah.
And then once you do that and you're like, cool, I feel good in the gym.
Yeah.
Like focus on performance, and that's what I coach my clients, right? It's like focus on how you feel in the gym, how much you recover, how much weight you can lift, and then like try and shift your attention there. Because if you can kind of like again shift the attention there away from kind of like how you feel on the scales, good.
Yeah.
Great. And that's the thing. It's like scales are good to an extent, but again, I try and pull my clients away from an emotional attachment to the scales as much as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And again, it just goes back to being a data point.
Yeah.
Where it's like, all right, this is just data. This is just an informed data point to know that everything we're doing is in line with what I've predicted when it comes to whether you're trying to gain weight, lose weight, or whatever it might be. Right. And that's all it is.
Yeah. And once you can do that, then the whole thing is a lot easier.
Absolutely, man. Yeah.
It's no different. Said it before on the show. If you're trying to build a business, I'm sure you would have metrics for your track, and then you have your KPIs, and all the things.
Or you just run around like a headless chicken.
Yeah.
See
Which
what happens.
Works at a point. And then you get more stress, and then you get bad gut health, and then the cycle repeats, and then you're out of shape, and then you need to get a coach. So, in regards to stress, what are some things? A couple of key things that you can do, key takeaways if someone feels stressed that they can do, or metrics that they can look at to at least start to make some change.
Cool, good. Yeah, I mean, look, like, I guess if you're wearing a wearable, like heart rate, you know what I mean, is a big one for me.
Yeah.
Like, I want you to get you into a healthy heart rate, so that for me, like, my clients should be below, ideally between 50 and 63 beats per minute.
Yeah.
Right, as a resting heart rate. That's like, for me, like green zone.
Yeah.
Right. Anything up that, we're getting into yellow. Anything higher than that, it's like red zone. Right.
Yeah.
That would be kind of like on my first port of call. And you can see it with the coaching clients that track all these metrics. Right. You can see when they're stressed, we start to see the heart rate go up, and it's like, all right, cool. Maybe we're overreaching, or you've just got a lot going on now. Maybe we could pull back a little bit on the training volume. You know what I mean? And just we use that data to make informed decisions.
Or add a little bit of cardio and get your heart healthy.
Well, that's it, right? And that's it. It's like we need to get you cardiovascularly healthy, right? And it's, for a long time, I guess I did cardio, but not to the extent I think about it more now as I get older. It's like
for a period, it was the demonized thing. Like, fuck cardio.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, I've always been relatively. I would obviously played rugby, and I would do cardio, but it wasn't a main focus in my gym training. And my main focus in the gym was kind of like, I guess, strength and building muscle, hypertrophy, and using that as way. I didn't really do cardio in the gym.
Yeah.
I would do things outside. I would play rugby. I would mountain bike. I would do things like more active outside, and didn't really use the gym to do cardio.
Which I think in an ideal world, those activities are almost perfect, because
I agree.
You enjoy them.
You enjoy it. You don't think about it. And I think, again, I'm very pro with my clients saying like, okay, cool. Do you have a hobby outside of the gym? No. All right. Well, maybe we should get you looking at something, right? There's going to be an active hobby that you enjoy. Not only is that going to be good for your cardiovascular health, but good for stress. Because if you can get out of your head into something and focus, that is going to be one of the best things you can do for stress. Right. And I think like even now I'm looking at maybe going and doing something again like gymnastics or something like that. Where I have to be fully present and focused on what I'm doing to get myself out of my head and focus on what's in front of me.
Yeah. Take up mountain biking again, mate. Flying down a trail, you'll be real focused.
Yeah, well, I mean, the last time I did that, I did like a kind of backflip over a tabletop, and I like flipped over it and then hit the back wheel and flipped myself forward, and then I still have a scar like just under my chin.
Yeah, don't do that. You were present though when you were doing
I was very present. Yeah, it was good. I mean, even just like I went for a surf last week with Juan, right? It's just like getting out of the water where you're detaching from digital enough, and like that's the hard thing with I think online. Because one, I'm across multiple continents and time zones, but also you're attached to your phone and like your business in that respect. It's quite hard to detach from that side of stress.
Yeah. This year, I deleted all my social media off my phone, and that's just for video, and I only have it on my iPad.
Yeah, smart.
So that's
how do you go with uploading this? I think like.
I use it onto, it all uploads straight to Google Photos.
Yep.
And then I can pull it off my computer or onto my, and so
good idea.
Google Photos, one of my clients actually works for Google and does the Google Photos and is actually quite good at sharing photos now.
Yeah, cool.
And video. So so my phone, it's really, really good because, you stop at a stoplights and grab Instagram out. I can't do that anymore. Yeah, because I haven't had it on there for 3 months and I'm not going to have it. So that's been a big one for me.
Yeah, I like that idea for sure.
Managed a lot of stress. But sorry, so cardio, so you went heart health?
Cardio, heart health, yeah, 100%.
Get that heart rate down.
Yeah, let's look at blood pressure as well, right? Yep. Blood pressure, again, the silent killer.
Yeah. Like
most people, like, again, if you got someone with high blood pressure, stick them on a leg press and like, you're going to see that systolic blood pressure go through the fucking roof, right? And have a heart attack. Don't do it. Yeah. So blood pressure, we need that to be healthy, right? Yeah. Again, cardiovascular health, exercise can help with that. If we've got someone with high blood pressure, we're not going to make them lift heavy weights, right? It's like, let's look at like reducing maybe sodium. Again, on the opposite end of that, if you've got kind of low blood pressure, then maybe you need some more sodium and actually get you lifting heavy weights, right? To kind of bring that up to a healthy range. So you've got two ends of the spectrum, but blood pressure, very important. And sleep, man. Like, sleep is king for everything. Performance, stress, relaxing nervous system. And it's a thing that I'd say most clients struggle with, one, getting a good amount, but also sleep quality. Yeah. Right. So it's like, what are they doing in the evening routine? Like, again, dimming lights. Are they having a routine where it's calming their nervous system down, not spending time in front of their iPads, phones, TVs, all these things? And, again, I'm a big mouth taper, so I tape my mouth shut, which I found beneficial for me, personally, anecdotally, because I was very much a mouth breather, where I'd be like, mouth open, fucking dry, and I wake up with a dry mouth.
Dribble everywhere.
Absolutely, and for me, that's really helped my kind of deep sleep and my REM sleep.
Have you broke your nose before playing footy, or?
Do you know what? I don't know. I think I have, because I struggle to breathe, so I put a nasal strip on. It's definitely not the easiest thing to breathe through my nose. When I put a nasal strip on, it definitely helps.
Two things that I found that help with that, because I've broke my nose when I was, it's a funny story actually. Me and my brother, we used to have 2 mattresses in our lounge room that were just like spare mattresses. They'd sit behind the couch, and we used to wrestle on them and things like that. Yeah, in the lounge room, we'd play like footy on it and stuff. Anyway, my brother thought it was we'd push them together. My brother thought it would be a really good idea if I went out to the kitchen, I ran as fast as I could at him, and he would tackle me and make me do a front flip.
Amazing.
Yeah, I was 12, so I was like, "Gosh, this is a great idea." And he did that and just sort of tossed me up, and then I come down straight between the mattresses and landed face first onto a concrete floor. Wow. Just busted my nose up. So I haven't really been able to breathe out through my left nostril since I was 12, which at the time I was like, it doesn't matter, I've got another one in a mouth, but now I realize that. But 2 things that help me is, and it's probably shouldn't admit it on air, but those jaw exerciser things?
Yeah, I know the ones.
Frank Pop.
Yeah.
I was like,
it looks like some weird like German sex party kind of
Yeah. That actually does mad things with the muscles behind your nostril and stuff like that. When I do that and bite down really, really hard, I can feel it just.
Yeah, wow.
Just opens up.
It kind of like eccentrically opens.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but then just both will be super clear. Cool. More than ever any nose tape. And then the other one is, since I've been doing the podcast, I've started to work on my enunciation and pronouncing words and things like that. And there's a drill where, I don't know exactly what it does, but you run your tongue around the outside of your mouth. So like this. Like that. Yep. And when you do it for, they say do it for like 10 reps, super, super random, makes the back behind my ears and my jaw just light up like the biggest pump I've ever had.
Yeah, wow.
And then I just was doing it, and then I was like, I can breathe in through my nose. So I don't know, I haven't looked into it, but I think there may be something to do with the musculature of our face that changes, because you've seen the whole thing with the jaw thing.
Yes.
It's on that we used to eat tough food, raw meat and things like that, and our masseter, and so I think because it kind of pulls the skull in sort of slightly different directions, I actually could then breathe through my nose more than anything else that I've ever done.
That's wild.
Yeah,
I might try that.
Yeah, like just bite down. I would give you mine to share,
Yeah,
but
a bit weird.
but yeah, biting down on it, and I just breathe. Yeah, wild. So
that's cool.
Yeah. But if I was to do the mouth taping thing without probably doing that before, I'd freak out. Yeah.
It took me a while to get into it. Like, I had to train myself to do it. And after that, big stuff. Like, it works a lot for me.
Yeah, that's cool.
I feel better with it.
Yeah. That's a massive one, the sleep. Have you read Why We Sleep?
Yes.
Yeah. It was a bit depressing when I read that for the first time. I was like, nah, I don't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm shortening my telomeres. I'm covering down a very young death. Yep.
Yeah. That was a big thing for me to get used to. I think if you can read one book, or even, he's got a few good podcasts where he talks about it. Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep. Everybody should read it.
Oh, 100%.
Everybody should read it, because once you start to realize, that you're essentially, if you're that person that I've had one of my clients, he works sometimes 27 hours a day, and I'm like, how do you function? He's like, oh, it's kind of fine. I'm like, it's kind of not.
No, I know. I got like one client like that, and I'm just like, I want to stop this before things get pretty hairy.
And all the damage that you've done, because once we miss once we have a bad night's sleep, we can't ever recoup that.
Correct.
That has done damage for the rest of your life. You can only do whatever you can moving forward. But, learning the sleep cycles, and because do you remember there was a period, I think Tim Ferriss might have been one that sort of popularized it, where they got down, they were like, REM sleep is the thing.
Yes.
And it's like, if you just get your REM sleep in, you'll be fine. So you can get down to sleeping like less than 2 hours a day with intermittent naps.
Yeah, they all tried that. There was a few guys that did that, and they would do the kind of 2 hour nap thing, which was weird.
Yeah, and then but you've just missed all the other 4 stages of sleep or whatever it is, and that one's a massive one for me. I notice a big difference, and I'm very aware of it now.
Oh, dude, massively. Like, I now try and get at least 7.5, 8 hours every night. Yeah. At minimum.
Yeah.
And it makes a such a big difference to every area of my life.
Yeah.
In terms of how I feel, brain function, performance, a lot. Right. And like now, I guess my thing is now swaying more towards, I guess, like brain function.
Yeah.
And not necessarily like strength performance, but more like brain cognitive function and health. So I need my brain to be like on very like sharply for the day.
Yeah.
And if I don't get that sleep, then it makes a big difference.
Yeah. And if you're getting that sleep and your brain functions on, then you're probably going to be stronger as well too.
Exactly.
You're going to be happier, you're going to be healthier, you'll make better food choices. I think that's one thing that people are just not aware of, that if you're really tired, your brain's going to try and get something out of you to compensate.
Well, exactly. And even like from a fat loss standpoint, right? It's like, if you are underslept, guess what? You're going to lose a lot more muscle mass than you are kind of fat mass, right? Yeah. And you end up just looking like a skinny bitch.
Yeah.
No one wants to be a skinny bitch.
No one wants to be a skinny bitch. How are you doing for time, mate?
Oh, we're good.
We're good? Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Sweet. Well, let's keep going if we got we talked about it a little bit. Maybe we go, what are you did mention this a little bit. What are some of the things you've changed your mind about in terms of training, health and fitness, or training?
Training, things I've changed my mind about. I guess not being afraid to do high volume, high reps.
Yeah, okay.
Mainly high reps, right? And I think it's just like, for a long time I would stick kind of in the like classic like 8 to 12 rep range, or like go down to your 5-3-1s for your strength phase, and stay within that realm. Now I am like, all right, cool. As long as we are taking this close to relative failure of like 3 reps in reserve, going like 20-30 reps is fine. And like the lactate metabolic stress you're going to get from that is good.
Yeah.
I still used to play around with that a little bit, but I'd say like more so I use it more with clients now.
Yeah.
Where I'm not afraid to go into the higher rep side of things. Like, yes, it's going to take more time. But again, if we're looking at training different systems, like from an energy standpoint and function standpoint, like if we're looking at metabolic stress, for example, it's just like, all right, cool, let's put that into a workout where you're hitting all of the things in one session, right? Just like, all right, you've got your kind of strength component, you've got your, I don't know, like muscle hypertrophy component, and then you're finishing off with more metabolite work in the same session.
Yeah.
So then it's more of a, I guess, a well-rounded workout if we're looking at training all the things in one thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and I guess the other thing is tempo.
Yep.
As well, I've changed my view on tempo. So tempo, I guess, now is more relative to the exercise I'm doing rather than prescribing tempo based on what we're trying to achieve, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So it's like, all right, cool. Like if we're choosing for example, like a Bulgarian split squat or a squat where it's like, all right, the most tension is at the bottom of the movement, it makes more sense to spend time there.
Yeah.
So when it comes to tempo, I'm going to prescribe tempo that allows us to pause in those ranges rather than just doing, I don't know, like 3-1-1-0, whatever it is. Like it's like it being more specific on my tempo work has made a big difference, I think, in terms of training.
Yeah, for sure.
And it makes more sense.
Shout out to Charles Pollock on there.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. No, that's a big one. I had that conversation with a client yesterday. She wants to build muscle mass, but also loves rushing into the bottom of a squat and a Bulgarian split squat and getting out of there very fast.
Like most people, right? Because it's the hardest part.
Yeah. And the reason why you try to get in and out of there fast is because it is the hardest part, but it's also the most, not in all cases, but it can be one of the worst case scenario. If it's not the most growth promoting part, if you miss it, it's going to be the least growth promoting part. So getting there, spending time there, and actually getting comfortable there.
And range joint stability, right, as well. It's like that's where you're going to challenge the stability of the joint, which we want, right? Because when we get older, that's what we're going to lose first.
Yeah.
So.
And then standardizing range of motion, what's a split squat if you don't, or a squat if you one rep is half the range, or whatever it might be. Do you
know what? The split squat's interesting, right? Because we've kind of got the different varieties of split squat. We can have like 27 different variations of split squat, right? And you got your ATG split squat, which is like kind of really knee over toe kind of thing, right? But then we've also got the kind of like vertical shin angle up and down movement where you're going to get more movement at pelvis as well. So I think it's knowing when the range of motion we want to use is going to be beneficial for the thing that we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely,
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, there's going to be different benefits. I'm not saying that limiting range of motion is bad, but also it's going to be elements where if we limit range for a specific intent of that exercise, there's going to be benefits.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah. And limiting within essentially like a Bulgarian or more of a vertical shin angle split squat is going to be a limited range relative to an A to G split squat.
Exactly.
But it's going to be full range for that, and realistically, you're going to get more action at the hip.
Correct.
So it's still a full range.
Yes.
It's just that it's not full range taking knee flexion into account.
Well, that's it, right? And it's just like, again, it's just changing what full range looks like depending on the intent of the exercise, right? And this is where like you get people bashing certain things on the internet, like this is the best variation. It's just like every variation is good.
Yeah.
It just has a different intention.
Yeah.
Right. And like when you kind of start to understand it more in that sense, it's like, all right, cool. You can understand why someone's done that or put that in because it gets this result from that.
Yes.
Right. And I actually had a question from one of our clients put it on for the podcast question, which was, how do you go about choosing exercises for the person in front of you?
Yeah, cool.
Which is a good question,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Again, for your process probably similar to mine. It's just like, well, we need to look at that person's skill level.
Mm-hmm.
We need to look at that person's degree of internal stability, and we need to look at their competence in their movement patterns, and then we can choose the exercise based off of that, but also their posture, right? And understanding when we look at kind of like center of mass and where this person's posture is in space, etc. Then if we've got someone that is very much falling forward or push forward, are we going to load them with a posterior back squat? Like, no, it's just going to push them further into that posture and cause more issues and movement compensations, right? So this is where, again, the prescriptive exercise thing is really important, because that's how we choose it. Right? We can look at all these things and look at your movement and be like, all right, well, it makes sense to do this. Or if you lack internal rotation, then we're going to use a contralateral load. Or if you lack external rotation, then ipsilateral load. Like, then you're being a bit more prescriptive with that exercise for that person. And then obviously the goal is to then restore function and get them to a back squat. Right. But when it comes to exercise selection, that is really the kind of key player. It's like, all right, everything has an intent, and knowing when to use that specific area of exercise for that person based off of what we see of how this person moves in space, and their posture is going to be important. Like, is yours similar to that? Or?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Like, I'll never give. I think there's potentially a misconception around some of the things I do. With some people, they're like, "Oh, you just do every back squat for everybody." I don't have many people back squat, because I don't think many people should back squat if they don't need to back squat. I'll always fit in with the exercise that's going to be best for them. You know, if someone doesn't have the ability to get on one leg to do a variation of a split squat, I probably won't get them on one leg to do a variation of a split squat. Or if we do, then it's going to be, you know, we're going to use a dowel, or we're going to use some sort of external stability, because you have to be able to match that exercise, or match the exercise to the client, because what you and I do, there's elements of what we do with our clients in terms of exercise selection, because it's the same process. You know, there's certain things that you'll do that I won't do, and that I'll do that you won't do, because you'll pick exercises fit for your body, and I'll pick them for mine.
100%. Yeah, I mean, structurally, we have differences, right? You know what I mean? Like, you know, like, again, even females, for example, it's just like the whole knee valgus thing, right? If you look at the kind of like Q angle from their pelvis to their femur, right? It's just like that angle is very different to a male. So therefore, knee valgus is going to be more apparent in a female than it is a male. So is knees in a bad thing? No. Right? Like, we're probably going to see that, and that's okay. Right? But everyone's scared of it. Like, oh, no, knees caving in's bad. No, can't do it.
Don't do it. I was actually having a conversation about it this morning, because that was to your point before about talking about Kelly Starrett, one of the new trainers. And back in the day when everything was external rotation and knees out. And I was like, it definitely has its place. It's just probably more towards the powerlifting style squat, where that's, you know, they have their confinements of their squat and their sport. And if they squat like me, for instance, I did a powerlifting comp last year. I didn't have anywhere near the biggest squat. I wasn't going there for that. I was just going to test my squat. I knew that the way that I squat is not going to be the biggest squat compared to someone else. But their squat's going to be best for that. And there was a point where that, you know, I think back then, which is probably 10, 12 years ago, the knee valgus was the no-go.
100%.
No-go.
And it's like, I think, again, going back to like the question of like, what's my main change on? It's that, right? The knees out thing, because that is one of the fundamental things that I used to coach and say to every single person. Now I'm just like, if anything, like knees in. Right? It's like, even on RDLs, right? Because most people, if you look at like the general postural issues that I see, most people are jammed into lumbar extension, they're jammed into an anterior pelvic tilt.
Which is they are a lot of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Their femurs are jammed into external rotation, right? So it's just like, we need more IR, right? So how do we do that? We bring your knees in, not out. So the whole knees out thing, it doesn't really play for the majority of like posture compensations that we see.
No. I think with that as well, the intent was always good.
Oh, of course.
Always good. But there's so many complexities with human movement. As you start to learn more, you're like, oh, fuck. It's crazy. And, you know, I think as I've gotten into learning a little bit more of kind of like the PRI stuff and what Conor Harris does, and I think with the pre-script, they're big on like the rib cage and the pelvis and all that sort of stuff.
Level 2 was very much around that, right? It was like, pelvis, rib cage, gait cycle, looking at foot mechanics, and how that interlinks, and breathing mechanics especially, right? And it's you can dive down the rabbit hole, and I guess what I liked about prescriptives, and Jordan and Bax, who's my coach, they say it in a way that makes sense, right? And PRA was almost too much down the rabbit hole, where it was just like, I'm not going to get a very strong human and get them on the back breathing into a fucking balloon. No. I'm just not going to do it. No. Right?
That's kind of gone now.
Yeah, thank fuck. Yeah. Right? It was just like, I don't want to see any balloons going off in the gym. Right? There's a place and a time for balloons, and it's not in the gym. All right? It's no. We're there to lift weights. I'm not going to breathe into a balloon. Yeah. I got the concept, but for me, I was like, I'm nah.
Yeah.
Let's try and make it a bit more applicable, but also make it so we can, again, hide the vegetables and spaghetti sauce for what we're doing, and just breathe into positions that are going to be relative to that human, right? And I guess that's what has changed for me in terms of the way I train now. It's like I still do the kind of like strength hypertrophy things, but there's more intent or thought behind how I'm breathing into these positions to get the kind of like, I guess you have like your primary, secondary, and tertiary benefits of that exercise. It's like I'm thinking about it in terms of like, okay, am I getting anterior expansion? Am I getting posterior expansion? Like I'm a wide infrasternal, right? So I'm going to be biasing like anteriorly supported positions that forces posterior expansion of my rib cage, so I can keep rotation and things like that. And so that it means you're smart with your exercise selection, right? And what you're actually doing in the gym to bias you. Like I do a lot of unilateral arm work as well. Again, thinking about my carry angle of my arm and matching that, so I'm not putting too much stress on my elbow joints and things like that, and that's going to improve my overall shoulder function and rotation and all these things. And I guess that's the biggest change for me in terms of how I think about exercise now. Is I try and think smarter with what I'm doing and what other benefits does this exercise have to my bodily function. Right. And I think that comes with experience and knowledge and application, which you know you've done the same.
And it's cool once you can. The conversation I was having with one of the new trainers from Marrickville, he wanted to do a bit of a sit down and go over some stuff, and he asked me about those sorts of things, and he's like, "Oh, how do I not PRI per se, but just in terms of." He was like, I want to do this with my movement assessment, but then I think this will be more valuable. How do I, I think I should do it over here. I was like, well, we can use the general movement assessment as that. And then you can start to get these things ticking in your head of like, okay, well, I see this with a person in this general movement assessment. I'm going to have a template where I can then get them to do, maybe it was around a bit of shoulder function. Okay, most clients want, bigger chest and shoulders and stuff like that. But if their shoulders are dysfunctional, it was like, how can we take all these good things that we know that we need them to do, and then how can we get them to do the pressing exercise as well, which is excellent for shoulder stability. That's one thing that I fucked up a lot, is when I was had so many shoulder injuries, I was like, I need to do all these shoulder stability drills. Bench press is mad for shoulder stability, like in terms of
100%.
The person who's got 100 kilo bench or more has pretty stable shoulders.
You can't argue with that.
No, very, 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 very basic view of it, but you have to have stability, otherwise you can't lift some weight there. So I was like, cool, let's do these things, but then also like while we're working on these things, we can start the ball ticking on, get ticking on the things that we're going to layer that with. And then that's how you can start to have that broader view of exercise selection.
And it's having those layers, right? And I think it's like, now the way I look at like movement exercise is like, you kind of have that like electron, and then you have the layers around it and the circles around it, right? The vectors. It's like the way I look at like the function of movement now is through those layers, right? So if we think about the shoulder, it's like everything starts with the diaphragm, right? And like we just pull everything back to that, and then it's the rib cage, and then you got your scap, and then you got humerus, and you got scapulohumeral rhythm, and it's just like, all right, cool. Then we kind of piece things together and work backwards of what's going to affect that. It's like, okay, breathing first. Then we need to look at the rib cage, so thoracic mobility and movement there. Right, then have we got shoulder stability like through the scap? So we got like internal, external rotation. Look at the rotator cuff and the function there, and then okay, cool. Like, what's our degree of kind of like flexion and extension and external rotation, those things, and then we can kind of like piece it together in a way that makes sense. So when we're choosing exercises, we know what is going to be the right exercise to improve that person's shoulder function based off of those things. Right. And it gives us that kind of gold standard process to be able to do that. And make it so it's effective and it makes sense to our clients and it gets them from A to B. Right.
It's no different to if you were to take your car to a mechanic and you're like, oh, I don't know, it's not working. He's like, oh, cool, I'll change the tires, see ya, or whatever it might be. We have a lot of diagnostic tools that are at our disposal, and obviously we can talk about it from, over a decade each of experience doing it, because we fucked it all up at
100%. I'm not sitting here saying I haven't made all the mistakes in the sun, because you and I both have multiple times.
Yeah,
And
for
that's
sure.
that's how you learn.
Yeah,
and if you don't think you're a shit coach at the start, then you probably still are a shit coach.
But I think where, I guess potentially where it may differ is that, you're going to fuck shit up when you start, but as long as you mean well, you can see that you don't know it all, because everybody goes through that period of like, oh, now I know it all. And then you realize, oh, fuck, I don't know it all.
Dunning-Kruger effect. And then you end up in Mount fucking stupid. Or the valley of despair.
Something like that. We've all been up or down there, close to it at some point.
Mount stupid, then valley of despair. That's how it goes.
Yeah. And so just having that, I guess a lot of it comes back to critical thinking and having a wider perspective of what it is. And to your point before that Maddie's said, the expert generalist, is you can start to like see those things. You have to admit that you're wrong as well too, to be able to see those.
100%.
And, or even if you're just like, it's just a bit off. How can I make that better?
It's just the lens you look through, right? Yeah. And like, I think as you get more experience with coach, you learn to ask better questions.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, let's use hip flexors as an example. Hip flexors, right? What do they do? Like, most people come in and be like, oh, my hip flexor's tight. What do people do? They stretch it or they try and strengthen it.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a very narrow, like, look at what the problem is, right?
Yeah.
What we need to kind of ask ourselves is like, all right, well, why is there so much applied force going to our hip flexors?
Yeah.
Right? Then we can ask better questions. We're like, all right, cool. Is it the position of our rib cage and our pelvis?
Yeah,
right? And it's like, then we can kind of start peeling back the layers of actually finding the problem and fixing the deeper level problem that is going to fix fundamental issues, instead of just kind of like, I guess, like if we go back to the car mechanic analogy, right? It's like, if you go to the car mechanic and the kind of like, I know the engine light is on, it's just like the car mechanic changing the engine light and being like, oh, cool, it's fixed now.
Fixed it,
right?
There's no engine light.
There's no engine light, so you're good.
Yeah, it's a much better analogy.
Instead of actually going into the engine and fixing the problem.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think that's where it's important to then understand the global mechanics of things, so you can have this approach.
Yeah.
And then the difference that will make to then your clients' results and how they feel is going to be, tenfold.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely more heightened when there is, when pain is present or there's massive postural, imbalances and things like that. That's when you really got to go down to it. But I will keep all these things in mind with my exercise selection. And, if someone's not in heaps of pain and they do have pretty good ranges of motion, they're going to keep those things in mind. Add, like you said, I like the analogy of, putting some vegetables in the bolognese sauce. You start to sprinkle those things in there and you can start to. But I guess if anybody's listening and you're not a coach and you're a client, I guess appreciate what the thought process that goes behind it as well too.
100%.
There's so much to it. But I guess as we think about it as well too, it's the classic, I think MP talked about it with the expert coming in, assessing the machine and then turning a screw and then charging $10,000 and like, it took you 5 minutes. And he's like, to find it, but it also took me 10 years to go, it's that screw.
100%, man. And it's, like even pain, right? Like understanding or looking more at the pain science, and like what we touched in Prescript too was like kind of looking at kind of the brain, nociceptors, pain receptors, and then kind of like, I guess the link then to your nervous system and everything else and CNS and how that kind of integrates. Your pain receptors, especially when you're in a stress state, are going to be heightened, right? And we understand now that kind of pain is a learned behavior.
Yeah.
So you heal an injury, but you unlearn pain, which is kind of interesting, right? Because it's like, all right, I've had clients come in where it's just like, all right, I can't get into knee flexion or whatever it is because we're in pain, and yet you get them to squeeze your hand and then move through that, and they can do it without pain.
Interesting.
Which has been some interesting kind of learning curves over the last year of kind of applying that stuff in practice, where you can take people's mind away from the site that's painful and get them to actually move through that range of motion, which is safe, but to them it's unsafe.
It's unsafe.
Right?
Sorry, continue.
No,
I had a very similar experience with my old man. He was booked in for 2 knee replacements and always painful knees. He was a builder for 30 years. I was like, cool, let's have a different approach. But this was a couple of years ago. I was like, just trying to find out what's going on. What can't we do? And I got him into a quadruped position, and he could not get in and out of a chair without someone stabbing him in his knees. That's what he felt like.
Great.
So technically no knee flexion, definitely couldn't get into a full squat. Got him in a quadruped position. So for anybody listening just on all fours, just rock back and see how close you can get your ass to your heels, and had full range. So there was pain there, but also then when there was no danger, like, and you change that stimulus, then all of a sudden we have no pain. And that's someone who's booked in to go for a knee replacement.
Yeah.
Eventually got him up to being able to squat, a decent squat with 40 kilos, no pain and things like that. But it's just changing the stimulus, and that I did not know that with the. So what does that do? What's the mechanism behind the squeezing of the hand, and then?
So again, if we think about it like the nociceptors, so again, if you're fearful of something, right, it's going to be your nociceptor is going to heighten that pain receptor. So you'll focus on that. Whereas if we get someone to like squeeze something with their hand, obviously you're going to kind of stimulate different neurological pathway to your brain, and take your mind away from that. So your nociceptors won't be firing as much. Right. So it's just again changing that neural connection and stimulus to your brain, and it's just rewiring it a little bit. And then it's because they're focused on this. Cool, they can do that. Cool. So great. So it's like little things like that. Like I guess have been useful in my coaching over the years. Absolutely. And how I approach different scenarios with clients.
That's really, really cool. The more you know, mate.
That's it.
Let's go one last little one, because we've been going. You're probably going to be the longest episode so far.
I can keep going, but
mate.
I'm probably going to wrap us soon. Cause
So do I. I need to get out and do a piss, to be honest.
Same. I'm like, oh, God, I'm going to go. I mean, I've pretty much drank 2 of these. And I'm just like, if I drink any more, I'm just going to piss everywhere. My double barrel, not a good idea.
At least I won't get hit. Top 10 exercises as a rapid fire, and why?
I mean, the rapid fire is going to be really rapid. All right, okay, let's go. Top 1, Bulgarian split squat. Cool. All right, length and quad. Like everyone sits down too much. We need to get length and quads. And like from a hip stability standpoint, like unilateral exercise, you can't really go wrong. Single arm dumbbell row. Again, kind of like similar for the upper body. Like unilateral exercise, you're going to integrate kind of like rib cage movement, thoracic, oblique, everything. So again, it's an integrated movement. I think that's those 2 for me are your top 2.
Bang for buck.
In terms of bang for buck, right? If you're doing those multiple times a week, cool, good. I think every Gen Pop person should be doing that, right? Back squat, right? Like for people that can do it, right? And I put back squat there because it is a very much an expression of function. And I think, like you can't argue with that. Like, yes, there's going to be structural differences but for the majority of people, like if you have no structural issues, like you should be looking to do a back squat well, right? Next, hanging knee raise.
Nice, good one.
Yeah,
I think that was one of mine as well.
Hanging knee raise, 100%. Like integrating rib cage, pelvis movement, core contractions, going through kind of like shortening, lengthening of like trunk, super important. Right,
shoulder stretch.
Shoulder, obviously grip strength, like the dead hang element of it as well. Like again, bang for your buck, tons of exercise, like types of exercise.
Super accessible. So many chin-up bars, you can do it in any gym, anywhere.
Exactly. And moving on from that, from a shoulder standpoint, landmine press. Right, like landmine press. I think again, like the barrier to entry on that for the majority of people is low. Like that should be the starting point for most people's pressing, especially if they're looking to get overhead. You're in a half kneeling position. It's unilateral. Again, you're getting movement, upward rotation of the scaps, downward rotation. So serratus, rhomboid, etc. Great. So that's fantastic. Ew. What are they going to do? 5. Yeah, we're 5 down. Okay, cool. Underrated press ups.
Excellent bread and butter exercise.
Bread and butter, right? You can't beat it. Press ups, scap movement, protraction, retraction, upward, downward, all the things, integrating a whole body movement, right? And like when I guess I look at my top 10 exercises, it is about integrating whole body movement. For the majority of things. Going a bit calisthenics now. I think like kind of skin the cat German hang. Like rotation of shoulders. Getting into deep shoulder extension, again, good. Like very, very good. From
body
that
awareness.
Body awareness. How you move through space and time. Next one's going to be a bit, again, a wild card, kettlebell swing.
Fair.
All right. I think, again, for being able to create power in a hinge with a realistic movement like a swing is a good thing for most people to be able to do. Again, a lot of multiple benefits with that exercise. That I think, again, for people with low back issues, like as we get older, generating power, like that explosiveness of
being
it, like
able to
being
do it.
able to do it should be a very good goal for most people, right? Walking lunges.
Yeah.
100%, dude. Like walking lunges, obviously not just for the glute growth, but for the stability of the hip, right?
Yeah.
Lateral hip stability of that glute function, like being able to do that well, which moves me on to the next exercise, which is a single leg RDL.
Nice.
Again, I'd say that from a stability rotation standpoint on one leg, it's definitely up there.
Yeah.
Deadlift.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need to kind of go into that, right? It's like deadlift is the GOAT when it comes to exercises, I'd say. Where are we? I think pull-ups.
Yeah.
Are we 9?
I think you may be at like 11 or 12.
All
you
right,
can have
okay.
15.
All right, let's finish with pull-ups. But pull-ups again, like, upper body exercise, like muscular co-contractions, all the stuff. Like, those, I think, are mine that most people should be able to do well.
Yeah.
And if they do all those things well, then they're probably going to have a pretty functioning body.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that's my ones.
Anybody listening, you want to get to do all those things, go see Dave. He's
Thanks,
your man.
man.
He's your man.
I can try.
Yeah.
I try and fix people's problems.
Yeah. That's what we do, hey?
That's it, dude.
Make people healthier, get people moving.
Get people strong, jacked.
Yeah.
All the things.
Absolutely. And it's a pretty cool job that we get to do.
Oh, 100%, man. It's been a wild couple of years, right? I think it's like the industry has changed a lot, and we'll probably come back to this conversation later today, right? But the last couple of years, there's been a lot of change in a positive way, but also like in a weird way as well.
Yeah.
It's like if I look at when I first started coaching, like 14 years ago, to where I am now, like some of the stuff I do now, I'm just like, what? Like, what the fuck? Like, it's just wild. And I guess the access that we have to good coaching across the world, right? And it's just like we're not limited to training in the gym now, which has its pros and cons, for sure. Like I do miss kind of having that consistency of being in one place, but also it's kind of fun to have the variety of being able to move around and also coach people across multiple continents, which again, weird to say.
Yeah, it's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'll be there with you end of this year, mate. That's the goal.
100%, dude.
Get online and move around a bit and get over to the UK at the end of the year.
Man, it's I'd say it's a good place. It used to be a good place. It's a different place nowadays.
Yeah,
but,
true.
It's still a beautiful place. I still miss parts of the UK.
Yeah. No, it is cool. I'm keen to get over. I'm keen to get around and see a bit more of the gym scene. I didn't see that last time I was there. And hopefully take this over there. And
they've got some cool gyms. Chain, JP, like trained by JP. Yeah, he just opened up like a big space in Cheltenham, which is near me. And I'm like, I can't wait to go back and train at the gym. It looks sick.
Yeah, that would be. Train hard in there.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. There's gonna be some big boys, and like even his missus is like, she scares me a little bit. I'm just like, why? Wow, you did some crazy stuff with her. Cool.
I'll tell you a story about Mark Roper when we get off air with something like that. Oh, mate, that was good. I can't wait for the next one.
Dude, thank you for having me on. Good conversation as always, man. And there's definitely a lot we could go for hours on this stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure.
No, appreciate it, dude. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, mate. My pleasure. Mate, that was good.
Woo, man.